remind
I
me?
have Miss Exercise. Okay. Thank you. You're welcome.
Monica not coming?
No, she's gonna dial in. She's gonna dial in the microphone for her.
Really? She does it all the time now.
Well, welcome everyone. We're starting just a couple minutes late, but the first item of business, well, actually I need to call the meeting to order. I don't have the gavel. Second item of business is our study session, which is one thing I've been really looking forward to since this is, they all are great, but this is one of my favorite ones. So. It is 2.1, update and discussion on stewardship of community resources, strategic plan perspective. Ms. Myers?
Well, thank you very much. Good evening, Mrs. Pingarelli, members of the governing board. Mr. Savoy, I must say, stewardship of community resources is indeed one of my favorite things as well. And I'm honored to be here this evening to provide you with an update on the district's strategic plan and specifically to provide an update on stewardship of community resources. I have a temperamental mouse, so forgive me as I try to move along. The down arrow does help. Well, this evening I will share information on the fiscal 2019 strategic plan implementation process. I will also review the components of the plan as well as define the stewardship of community resources perspective. In addition, I will review the initial 18-month transition plan, projects to date, and identified next steps, including the transition from an 18-month plan to a 5-year plan. It was just over 13 months ago that we came together to start talking about a new strategic plan within the Peoria Unified School District. The governing board met initially on February 24th, 2018 in a study session regarding the need for a new strategic plan and the necessary steps to implement a new plan. A 6-step planning process was identified and exercises were completed by the governing board during that day to develop and share specific thoughts and ideas around elements of a new plan and the process that we would implement. Activities included reviewing the district's current mission, vision, and values, and documenting a strategic plan development timeline with a focus on enabling and sustaining the strategic planning process in the long term. The question was asked, what really matters to our community? Overall student success and achievement, safety and well-being, stewardship of taxpayer resources, and connection with the community all rose to the top. A strategic planning project team was subsequently formed, and at the March 15th, 2018 governing board meeting, an update was provided on work to date. That was a result of the February 24th, 2018 study session. Administration held a strategic plan retreat on Monday, June 4th, last summer to develop a complete framework and primary components of an 18-month transition strategic plan. Administration presented components of the plan at an administrators meeting to gather feedback from stakeholders within the district on June 7th, 2018. and answered questions and implemented comments in the planning process. In addition, another update was provided to the governing board on June 14th, 2018 in the second strategic plan study session. During the meeting, staff shared the framework for the transition strategic plan, which was designed to provide clear and unambiguous direction to district staff through August of 2019, and steps to begin full stakeholder and community engagement for the longer-term plan after that date. Information on the strategic plan was shared with the community, and input was compiled at a community engagement forum that took place on September 20th, 2018 at Centennial High School. And most recently, in fact, at our last board meeting, Mr. Gay provided a data management and cyber resilience program update to the governing board on March 14th, 2019. Components of the strategic plan are grouped by strategic perspective, or as we refer to it, the community's lens. One of the 4 perspectives is the stewardship of community resources. Goals for the plan and priorities are anchored in the 4 strategic perspectives. Built on these priorities is the important strategic work the district has already started, as well as foundational capabilities that are being constructed, and the establishment of a strong base on which future administration can build on. Components of the plan include strategic programs and projects. A program is a new or revitalized or ongoing activity that addresses a major weakness or a new emerging opportunity and directly contributes to quality in one or more of the strategic perspectives. A project, on the other hand, is managed and measured to ensure success of the parent program and is prioritized and vetted with a specific timeline and goals. So the definition of the perspective of stewardship of community resources is solidifying and adhering to effective policies, practices, and accountability for district resources. And as I've presented over the last year, I'll oftentimes incorporate this slide and provide the definition to remind the community of the perspective and how important it is to the district. 6 initial programs were identified under the perspective of stewardship of community resources. The first program is Cyber Security and Resilience. The Data Management and Cyber Resilience Project commenced in May of 2018 and was incorporated as part of the 2018-19 Strategic Plan project in June of 2018. The program's overall purpose is to maximize availability and effectiveness, as well as the use of accurate, timely, and reliable data, and to provide comprehensive cybersecurity and response capacity throughout the district as a whole. It is most closely aligned to the stewardship of community resources strategic perspective, but does provide support to the entire strategic plan. During the March 14th governing board meeting, Mr. Gay did share there is a committee working on cybersecurity and resilience. The committee is focused on developing Peoria-specific policies in this area, staff training, as well as formalized agreements that should be in place when data is shared with third parties. Resilience is focused on how the district can effectively prevent an attack by protecting data that is stored or in transit, as well as incident response planning. A second program under stewardship of community resources is program management and budget alignment. This program focuses on organizational results compared to cost, funding streams, and human and fiscal capacity and available capital. This includes data-driven decision-making when a program is being implemented or renewed. Stakeholder input in this area includes the Citizens Advisory Committee and budget team. In order to clearly define a desired outcome was met related to cost, administration has begun the process to review data management products that integrate multiple systems and takes into considerations outcomes associated with expenditures. This includes identifying and utilizing standard performance metrics. You've probably heard of them as KPIs, or key performance indicators, that provide a measurable value that demonstrates how effectively the district is achieving key objectives, targets, and goals. Work in this area will continue in fiscal 2020. A third program under this perspective of stewardship of community resources is Employee Group Classification and Compensation Program. The district engaged Heinfeld Meach and Company, a certified public accounting firm specializing in governmental and public school district accounting, auditing, and consulting, to assist the district with the compensation study this year. The scope of the study was limited and was intended to assist with the identification of compensation-related priorities and next steps. Study methodology focused on certified, classified, and administrative employee groups, and data collection factors primarily focused on work calendars, hourly and annual compensation, years of service credited at hire, compensation history, salary schedule data, and supplemental pay and stipends. Information that was compiled during the compensation study is being considered by administration and the budget team for fiscal 2020 budget priorities and compensation recommendations. In addition, administration is compiling actionable steps in fiscal 2020 as a result of the compensation study, including reviewing job descriptions, salary schedules, and other related modifications within the constraints of available funding. A fourth program within the stewardship and community resources perspective is facility utilization. The district is in the early stages of reviewing opportunities related to a future facilities utilization program. Effective use of school and department space has been discussed, in addition to opportunities for bringing new programs and activities to schools that are not at full capacity. An example of this is the opportunity that was shared with the governing board in January when we had our retreat, and Cactus High School presented opportunities they were exploring with a science, technology, and engineering program to enhance opportunities at their campus. Another example is the repurposing of the Challenger Center at Sunrise Mountain High School. In addition, the district has begun to review our school facilities board reporting and space utilization to optimize opportunities in the future. The district has also identified facility utilization as a future area of focus and opportunities that may be presented when we implement a management or analytics data system. Policy audits and updates was a fifth program under the perspective and part of the initial 18-month strategic plan. The purpose of the program was to bring Peoria Unified Policy up to date by reviewing all outstanding ASBA policy advisories identified as of August 2018 and applying identified changes to the existing policy manual by November of 2018. The initial Peoria Unified Policy Review and related ASBA policy advisory updates were addressed and completed on time during that time frame. Roles, responsibilities, and a time frame for ongoing maintenance and processing of future ASBA policy advisories, as well as Peoria Unified specific policies, are currently being developed and implemented. The sixth program is business continuity and disaster recovery. We have previously here in Peoria Unified implemented an IT disaster recovery program. And now at this time, we're starting to look at other areas, other functional areas and departments to ensure that those areas could function in the event of a disaster. That would include departments inventorying assets and relevant data for business continuity, and then to ensure that plan could be implemented and tested. So what is a business continuity disaster recovery plan? Well, oftentimes you'll hear of a hurricane or the fires in recent memory in California. How would an organization conduct business if there was a natural disaster and stakeholders could not report to their key location of work? So an example of a plan would be remotely setting up functional departments to run payroll or to pay vendors through accounts payable. So actionable and measurable next steps are being developed and will be implemented in fiscal 2020 to continue work in this program area. It's amazing that 13 months have passed and we're well through the 18-month initial transition plan. At this point, stakeholders from throughout the district are now coming together to pivot and move to a 5-year strategic plan. And under the leadership of Mr. Gay, we have representation from our schools and departments throughout the district, and those stakeholders are meeting weekly. It's a time commitment, and everyone's honoring that commitment to come together to more completely conduct success and reality assessments in all 4 of the strategic plan perspective areas. The team is gaining a more complete understanding of each perspective and asking essential and difficult questions. The 5-year team has started with the perspective of stewardship of community resources and will then move to student achievement to ultimately identify dependencies and relationships among all 4 of the strategic plan perspectives. In June of 2018, there was acknowledgement that the completion of all 6 programs under stewardship of community resources would be difficult in an 18-month time period, and there was acknowledgement that there would be some carryover into fiscal 2020. So that program work will continue. Associated rollover plans are being developed, action items are being noted, and goals are being finalized to continue that work. The 5-year strategic plan committee, as I mentioned, is meeting weekly and moving through the strategic plan perspectives. The work will enhance the initial 6 programs from the 18-month transition plan and identify new programs and opportunities. The ultimate goal is an ongoing plan that provides clear and integrated direction for schools, departments, and all stakeholders within the Peoria Unified School District, and provides a strong base for future growth and development for the district as a whole. That's the introduction summary of our status update for stewardship of community resources. I'm available to answer your questions at this time.
Wow, I didn't think you would go through it that quick. When I looked at it, I thought, wow, this is going to take a while. So I'm impressed. Let's see, Mr. Sandoval, you want to start with some questions?
Sure. So thank you, Ms. Myers, for the update. A quick question for you on the employee group classification and compensation program. When we take a look at that, it's one of the things that we've discussed, as a board, as a district, really, and the question being, how do we get our teachers, staff back on a salary schedule that's livable, right? One that, we were on, before '08, right? And how do we continue to build? So within this particular program, what outcomes are we looking for and by when? I mean, as we take a look at making our teachers and staff whole, and you prioritize within this program, is that the main focus with you and your team? And I know you're doing a lot of work and kind of looking in all the corners and under all the stones, et cetera, but, is there a thought on timing or a timeline as to when we may be able to bring our teachers and staff up to a level that, is, certainly equal to being the 4th largest school district in our state?
Yeah. And when we compare ourselves to comparison districts that are unified and of a similar size, we do see we have some work to do. And if we look back to the funding cuts that have occurred over the years, both on the M&O and the capital side, and yes, there is now inflation funding again and the district additional assistance restoration. It isn't retroactive, it's just moving forward. So there were many, many years where we had very loyal employees who stayed with us and we weren't able to provide raises or increase salary schedules or starting salary amounts for incoming teachers. So that's a priority for administration as well as our budget team. The challenge is, and I mentioned it earlier, under the constraints of available funding. A number of our comparison districts have 15% overrides. We don't. We have a 13%. So that puts us not on a level playing field because we don't have the same level of income, if you will, to work with. But we're trying to very methodically go through the process of looking at actionable next steps. And the budget team is doing a very good job looking at district policy, looking at recommendations related to new funding that's coming in, related to the 2% inflation funding. We're going to receive that increase this year. And we're also looking at next steps to evaluate job descriptions and alignment of those job descriptions to salary schedules, and then to identify where there's opportunity for movement with our salary schedules. But it's very expensive, and we have a finite amount of resources to work with. So priorities will have to be made. And again, we don't have, in all cases, the same level of funding that's coming in as some of those comparison districts do.
Sure, no, and I completely understand that. But I think, you know, in the past, there's been discussions in and around the many programs that we have as a district that are out there that we have subscriptions to, if you will. And, you know, I would assume that we're looking at those and understanding where we're heavy, if you will, and where we can eliminate, you know, which would open up dollars. Now, the question becomes, you know, can we move those dollars into, you know, the M&O? But, you know, I think, you know, as we take a look at the district as a whole, it's a big district. You know, there may be some opportunities for us to be a little more efficient, and maybe even, I guess, capture some monies that would allow us to bring our teachers and staff up to a, you know, a salary schedule, again, that's livable.
And there are conversations along that line to look at where we can economize and be more efficient. I mentioned the data management program opportunity. That's a mechanism to help with that activity. But one outcome we knew up front with the compensation study was many years of cuts and frozen pay levels can't be fixed in one budget season or one fiscal year. So it's going to be a multi-year process looking across the board, across our entire district from a budget perspective.
And then I just have one last general question around the strategic plan. And I'm going to apologize in advance if this is already out there and I'm just not looking. But, you know, as we go through these updates and the perspectives, I mean, I'm assuming there's a working document out there that outlines the entire plan that, you know, maybe we can review as we update or as we make progress as a district?
Well, thank you, Mr. Sandoval. Right now, there's not a document. What we are doing with in our 5-year, well, let me back up. Our 18-month transition plan, what we did to document what we were doing, so to speak, is we built up project charters for each of the initiatives that were going forward. So those documents were created, and then the work just began. With the 5-year plan, there will be a more comprehensive document. We're building that process as we go through building the plan. So we don't have a document today. We will have a document as we adopt our 5-year plan.
Gotcha. Okay. Okay. Thank you.
You know, before I go to you, Mrs. Underhill, I just wanted to mention, I forgot to mention that we are missing one board member this evening, President Ceja Martinez. She will be calling in during our regular agenda item, or regular agenda this evening at 6 o'clock. So I just wanted to mention that. Ms. Underhill, do you have some questions?
So I just have some just general questions about a lot of, these are very large pieces that you're working on. One of the questions is, under the program management and budget alignment program process, can you just explain, like, when you talk about programs that you're looking at and evaluating, give a wide range of examples of what those programs are? Because to me, in my mind, I don't know if those are business processing programs or programs that could be academic or what they are.
Thank you. I'm going to ask Mr. Gay to help me comment on some of the products that we've looked at and how those software products can integrate among many functions within the district. If you'd like to elaborate on that a little bit.
Well, thank you, Ms. Underhill. I'm not sure, I want to make sure we answer the right question. I think what you're asking is when we say program aligned budget allocation, the exact phraseology I didn't get just a moment ago, but we're talking about what you're asking, what do the programs mean? That's it's a wide set of activities, but essentially what we mean by that is a program is a set of activities that is funded and staffed to accomplish a purpose.
Okay.
And so that can be an academic program. It can be a program that's supported with a software program.
Okay.
So the word program gets overused, unfortunately, in this context. But so the point of this whole idea is that we want to make sure that every program in that first definition I gave, meaning a set of activities with goals, staffed by people, funded, actually has a definition, it has boundaries, it has a budget, it has defined outcomes and defined ways of continuous improvement, metrics, all that sort of thing. Then if we have that identified for each program, then we align its funding, or we align our entire budget development with the funding of our programs.
Okay.
And that's something that is elusive to do, but it's something that we've committed to do for the district.
Okay.
And thank you, Mr. Gage. Just to check for clarification, I may have misunderstood your question. Were you asking about data management programs
No,
specifically?
I was more specific to that. Just is that a wide catchment of all of our actual district programs?
I see.
So, yeah, and I know that that would probably cross over multiple areas of the strategic plan, but I just was trying to kind of understand what that particular program is capturing. So that is broadly across the district then, okay. And you had mentioned like KPIs and that kind of thing. Now, that would be a metric that would measure more of a business process or a data type piece than a programmatic metric. Yeah.
Yes and no, and I'll reference back to ESSA, and some of the requirements will have long-term with school-level reporting and then actual per-pupil expenditure analysis. So you could have a performance indicator that might review expenditures at a certain location or for a program and test scores or student achievement as an example. So KPI is a very broad term, key performance indicator, indicators as a whole to identify if we're on track to meet our objectives, if we're getting the most bang for our buck, return on investment,
Right.
and that we're prioritizing our scarce resources appropriately.
Okay, that makes sense. That just, to me, that program within itself seems ginormous, unless I'm misinterpreting. And then the other question I had was about, on the facility utilization side, I recognize that, obviously we're within a limited budget and we haven't passed a bond and that kind of thing, and we need to look at the space that we do have and how we're utilizing that. But is that program also looking at, like, future growth of the district and what, visionarily, what we want our sort of footprint to be as, we continue to, just, I guess, thinking from not just a 5-year standpoint, but longer term than that, so that we kind of have in our minds where we want to go. So does that program also look at that?
The initial lens for the 18-month transition plan was existing buildings.
Okay.
However, your question is excellent. We annually look at our enrollment and needs district-wide, and we have a third-party vendor who helps us with that. That's Applied Economics, and some of that current information is actually going to be provided to our Citizens Advisory Committee on Thursday.
Okay.
So we are always looking to the future, and we have our fingers on the pulse of enrollment and growth within the district, but the initial 18-month program was truly focused on existing resources and facilities.
Okay, that makes sense. And I think that was my only question. I guess my only other question is just really thinking, going back again to that program management and budget alignment, because it was kind of presented as one of the programs of stewardship, but because that touches so many of the other areas, is that team, like cross-pollinated with the other areas, I guess is just what I'm trying to understand, how it all comes together.
They're interrelated, but the primary focus of the budget setting and the perspective alignment is within stewardship. So it's always important to be mindful of the relationships and the outcomes when decisions are made, ensuring that we're setting goals that are actionable and measurable and assigning those scarce resources to those goals and checking ourselves along the way to make sure we're achieving our objectives. So yes, there's a broad span, it's interrelated, but ultimately the primary focus is in stewardship.
Okay, great. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Yeah, and real quick, if I may, Ms.
No, go
Pingrelli, I
ahead.
apologize, but that's a great point, Ms. Underhill. I think, and that's where I was headed with the kind of this working document, right? So I agree. I mean, it's certainly, stewardship of community resources does cross over to all of these pillars or perspectives. But I think the more that we can work in a collaborative way, the better decisions we'll be able to make as a team on behalf of this very large district, right? Even from an IT regard as it relates to safety, of our students and staff, not just from a cybersecurity regard, but, we have other technology out there that's there to protect, all of our associates and all of our stakeholders, right? So, and I think that's where I was headed, with regard to the working document is, as we take a look at it and understand where there is crossover, I think those are, not KPIs, but certainly key considerations, that, we need to understand and understand, where we can, go from good to great in this process.
Absolutely. And Mr. Sandoval, to add to that comment and going back to Mrs. Underhill's question, when you had asked about programs, I thought you were asking specifically about data management systems, which uses technology to help a district of our size align activities to see those relationships, to plan for outcomes and associated budget allocations.
Ms. Stone?
I just want to thank you. I've been looking forward to the update, and I have enjoyed it, and I
Judy,
think that,
I'm sorry, do you have your mic on, or?
Yeah.
You do. Okay.
I think that it was very clear to me. I thank you for putting it where I could understand it, and I'm excited to see the work that's going on. I don't really have any questions, but I'm excited by, I think that implementing the strategic plan is probably the best thing we could do to get this whole district on the same foot. So, thanks a lot.
Thank you. And I just had a question on policy updates. I know we had gone through quite a few, and that you have here that 2019-20, we're going to do additional policy reviews related updates. Is it at that point that ASBA is going to, I know we had to get them up to date before they would start helping maintain them, I guess.
We met our objective this fall, updating our policy to the ASBA policy advisories. So the next step that we'll have is, from a district perspective, is to ensure we're in a timely manner implementing future advisories, as well as identifying Peoria-specific policies that we need to have in place. An example is the policy work that Mr. Gay is doing with cybersecurity and resilience. Another example would be uniform grant guidance, or perhaps Peoria policy related to community partnerships. But yes, that was a hurdle we had to clear.
It was a very large one.
Yeah.
So we've been working on the first quarter, and you've had a nice wrap-up on stewardship of community resources. We are going to be followed second quarter by student success, then by safety and well-being, and community connection to round out the year. And if things fall within that time, that's great. We'll emphasize if anything comes up that we need to take care of, even if it's outside of that time. I'm sure that we will keep on top of it. Mr. Spoy, I'm sorry, did you, Ms. Underhill?
Yeah.
I seen the look and.
Got the green
Go
light.
ahead.
One last question. When we take a look at, and you mentioned there's somewhat of a level of disparity with the diverse revenue channels that we realize versus some of the other districts. When we're taking a look at programs, whether enhancing or integrating, one of the things that we've always discussed is, affinity-type partnerships, meaning external organizations that may help us build on our capacity, right? Whether it's because, you know, we don't have the staffing or knowledge base to execute or fulfill, or potentially, you know, the resources, meaning financial, to you know, add additional headcount. So as we go through this process, you know, I think it would behoove us, if you will, and to take a look at, you know, external organizations that could help us build on our capacity without, you know, having to expend the dollars.
In partnerships with third parties, be it private grants, for example, or donations that may be restricted for a certain activity or outcome, or something that we appreciate, and we do celebrate those opportunities. We have about between $18 and $20 million of federal and state grant funding as well that does provide support for a number of our employees for positions within those grant programs. Sometimes a challenge with grant monies or partnership donations is they're not necessarily ongoing. And
Right.
that becomes problematic to embed that type of a revenue source into someone's base pay. So we're always very mindful and careful that when we make projections and compensation recommendations, that we have a funding source year after year to support it.
Sure, makes sense. Yeah, thank you.
Ms. Underhill?
So this question is just back to timeline again. So I know we have kind of our year planned out as far as covering the different components. So my thinking is just that if we're having this working document with theoretically having some, you know, project or programs with projects underneath them with the goals, is the idea that that sort of working document would be wrapped up at the end of the year so that all 4 components would sort of have their plan laid out? And I'm just wondering, because I know sometimes we're building the plane while we're flying, I get it, you know, and nobody needs a big, huge report to throw on the shelf, but I guess I'm just curious, is the expectation that all 4 of those components would have this type of plan laid out by the end of this year?
I want to make sure I answer that correctly, that I understand your question. When we roll out the 5-year strategic plan, yes, we'll have a document that describes what the intentions are in terms of accomplishing initiatives and addressing performance gaps and all that stuff in each of the 4 areas. Is that the question you're asking? Okay. I wanted to make sure.
And just like, what is the timeline for that?
When are we going to do that? Well, our intention right now is that we'll roll that out at the beginning of the school year, this coming school year. We have an enormous amount of work to do between now and then. Yeah. And so in fact, we were talking about this very issue today at our strategic planning meeting, is that we will have to figure out how much of it will we have fully baked and how much of it will be, and of course, in any kind of a 5-year plan, year 1 is fully baked, and as you get further out, it's more, you know, conceptual in nature, but still driven by the goals of the plan. So we'll have that documentation in place at the beginning of the school year. That's our intent at this time. Now, if for some reason we run up against a problem there, we'll certainly let you know, but that's our intent.
Yeah, I think, you know, for us, that's really all we can ask for. I mean, I guess my first question would be, I mean, how do you feel about that timeline? Do you feel pretty good about it, that we're going to meet that?
Well, I feel it's very, very tight. We've had some interesting things happen this year that not on the agenda tonight that I won't go into, but it's a tight agenda or tight timeline to get that done. I think we'll have a great outline in place. I think we'll have some really good specificity for year 1, perhaps year 2. I think years 3, 4, and 5 will be a little bit leaner on detail, but I think we'll still be part of an overall strategy for going forward. So a lot of work to do, and we're part of the tightness of the timeline is that we're building a process for building the plan at the same time we're building the plan.
Right.
And so that's challenging, but got a great team, and I think we'll get there.
Yeah, agreed. No, thank you for mentioning the transparency just around progress, right? I mean, so, you know, if you do feel, you know, that there may be some delay, you know, due to whatever circumstance, that communication or having that dialogue is important. And then the other side, I mean, we're here to serve you. So, I mean, whatever we can do to help, you know, with this, you know, meet that timeline, and please don't hesitate to ask. Thank you.
Yeah, I think also having like your 3, 4, and 5 a little less detail is smart because things change as you implement. You say, oh, that's working and that's not quite the way we want it and this thing's going to change on us. So, but it's for the better. So I think that's smart.
Mr. Savoy, did you have some comments or?
Yeah, thank you, Mrs. Pangrilli. Just a couple things. This conversation here at the end is excellent. One part of this is a great opportunity for the board to hear of the progress and the items that are under continual work from this area of stewardship. I think it's also an opportunity for the board to maybe talk about initiatives or vision that you have in this area that then, in this area of stewardship, Michelle would take back, work with her team, how do I craft an initiative or a goal underneath that, a project to work on that may be new or different. When you think the board has really only a few opportunities during the year to really churn a little bit about your vision in these areas, the board retreat typically in the summer, the board retreat in January, where it's really dedicated time for the board to have conversation revolving around these strategic areas. And then the concept of doing this process allows you that opportunity during the year, quarterly, to have those same conversations. So as you hear the update, it's also a time to say, I'd like you to focus on this again in the future, would be one thought. So I just wanted to add to that conversation. Thank you. The other things really quick. This may sound frivolous, but this will drive Mrs. Myers crazy. Area 1, how did it go? The first quarter, the second quarter, we're not really on the right schedule. We're really in the third quarter right now.
Of our fiscal year.
No, we recognize this
Yeah.
change. And Michelle, Ms. Myers says, can you help me with this? Because my whole world revolves around this. I said, okay, we're going to change the conversation. This is quarter 3. Quarter 4 will be student success. Is that correct, Ms. Myers?
Fiscal 19, that's correct, sir.
Okay. So I thought
Thank you for the correction.
we'll try to work on that. And then lastly, I just wanted to mention on the work with policy, your question, I think, was correct. I think I got the question right. We did the updates. The piece that we're still trying to finish, and I think we're pretty close, is what they call the policy bridge, loading that all into the ASBA document, running that reconciliation to see where we're aligned and where we're not, and then bring that final product back to the board. Our hope was to get that done this semester, so we're close. We're not quite there yet, but that is our intent. And then typically with the new legislation coming out over the summer, we'll get those updates and keep you all up to date on that. And the board then also can choose if you want to focus in on one section at a time and also review that. And I know that Mr. Gay is working on that new section on cyber resilience as well. So those are just some quick comments on policy. Thank you for the time.
Well, does anybody else have any other questions? Or Ms. Myers, do you?
Well, thank you for the opportunity to present the update on stewardship of community resources.
Well, thank you very much. With Mr. Savoy's comments, does anybody have any further, or shall we think about them further to, I mean, we can only individually give our comments to, this is the only time when we're all together that we can give them all together, but, Ms. Underhill?
Just the one comment I have is just like, there's so many big projects, and I guess I just want to make sure that we're not like burning you all out. You know what I mean? I mean, and that's where I know the strategic plan and the multi-year piece comes in, but this is just one area, and we've got 6 programs, with multiple projects. So I guess I just want to make sure that we're taking care of you guys so that, it's realistic.
Well, I would just add, Ms. Underhill, that we did this with the transition plan, and that was when we identified all of the initiatives that we felt were important for us to do. The next step we did is we sat down as a cabinet and said, okay, have we bit off more than we can chew? And so we had a very, very open and frank discussion about what can we get done of these things that we've identified and whatnot. So some of the things that Ms. Myers identified as work for next year's plan are those things that we decided we couldn't do. So we are actively making sure we don't overcommit ourselves. But thank you for that.
Yeah, and I think, sorry, Ms. Mingrelli, I think that, my final comment, I know you guys are already doing this, we talk about it all the time, is just always making sure that, we not only, hear, but we listen to the voices of all of our stakeholders as we go through these, perspectives, right? Again, especially our target audience, they, those are the ones that we're responsible for, meaning our students, and then those individuals in the front lines, at our sites, et cetera. They have invaluable information for us to make sure that we're thinking of everything globally. So thank you for doing that.
I just had one last comment before we break, before our regular meeting, is that this is a very important area in that we're looking at a potential bond and potential override, and that the community needs to be confident that this area is very strong with our district. So I thank you very much for all the updates and all your hard work, and your team.
Thank you.
All right. Well, at this time, I'd like to adjourn for 10, 15 minutes before we start our board meeting. Thank you very much. Do we don't need 9 minutes? I know, but I might need 10. All right. Okay, let's get started. It is a few minutes late, 6:09. We'll start the meeting. First item of business is 3.1, moment of silence, followed by the Pledge of Allegiance. This evening, we will be led in the Pledge of Allegiance by Frank Beard, an 8th grader at Country Meadows. Please stand.
Please join me as we recite the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you very much. Well, I just wanted to say that this evening, we are missing one board member in person, but she is next to me on the phone, President Ceja Martinez, so she will be joining us for the meeting. So for the next item of business is staff recognitions. Ms. Aries.
We missed a
I'm sorry.
Nope.
I haven't done this for a while.
That's okay. We're here to.
I'm sorry, address. This, I think, has changed since I was president. Yeah, okay. So the next item is 4.1, address agenda and consider adoption or recommended changes. Are there any recommended changes from the board? Okay. Then we will go on to 5.1, staff recognitions. Ms. Aries.
Thank you. Good evening, President Ceja Martinez, members of the board, Mr. Savoy, and to all of our guests. We have a number of exciting recognitions this evening, but first we will begin by celebrating our recent 32nd, if you can believe it, 32nd annual Patriotic Speech Contest, which recently took place. It's really become such a tradition here in the Peoria Unified School District, really a favorite event that's enjoyed by so many students, staff, and parents. We also have quite the caliber of esteemed judges that typically join us for this event, hosted right here in our District Administration Center. The students that attend the district's Patriotic Speech Contest and win in their respective school contests do advance to the district level. So we start out at each of our schools with some incredible participation, and then of course those students come here to compete. It's an opportunity for these students to share their understanding of patriotism while perfecting their public speaking skills and demonstrating their passion for a specific person or event. The students that we're going to recognize tonight are the best of the best, taking first place in their division within the contest. So we do have 4 winners that we'll be recognizing this evening, those first place winners. Students, I'm going to call your name, and when I do, if you could stand so we could give you a round of applause, okay? And then we have a little snippet of your speech that we're going to share with everybody tonight, okay? Sound good? So in Area 1, our 5th and 6th grade winner is from Oakwood Elementary School, Allie Black. In Area 2, 5th and 6th grade winner is from Saguaro Ranch Elementary School, Giovanni James. Area 1, 7th and 8th grade winner from Park Ridge Elementary School, Franz Mascunana. And Area 2, 7th and 8th grade winner from Country Meadows Elementary School, and a repeat first place winner from last year, Frank Beard. A big congratulations to these students. Now, we do have our incredible productions team that films these speeches, and so that is certainly a wonderful, wonderful way we're able to share them with the greater community. So if you'd like, I direct your attention to the screen so we can enjoy a little piece of each of these speeches.
The great historian Daniel J. Borston once said, "Freedom means the opportunity to be what we never thought we would be." Borston, in my opinion, spoke to the very essence of what it means to be an American. To have the opportunity to dream bigger dreams and to reach for the stars even when we were only shooting for the clouds. Beyond those clouds sparks fireworks of honor, independence, and liberty. I am proud to be an American because we have freedom.
In this country, we have the opportunity to go to school and study for a job we want. Then we can have an occupation which allows us to use our talents for the benefit of our families, our community, and our nation. Because we have the opportunity to go to school, we are able to learn and become good citizens and think for ourselves. An education contributes toward knowledge and happiness. Thomas Jefferson viewed basic education as instrumental to securing life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness for Americans, because it helps an individual understand his duties and know his rights.
Get up, people of America. We can't just sit here and do nothing. There's plenty of work to do. Let's start building bridges across our differences. We must be vigilant and stop people who force others to work for their convenience. We must not treat others as commodities, but as radiant images of life, family, and community. We as Americans should not live in unreasonable fear and violence. I challenge you that if you see something, say something and do something.
I leave you with the final thought. Vote, vote, vote. Educate yourself on the different candidates and topics. Don't waste your vote by doing nothing. Go to the polling station or fill out your absentee ballot. Know what you are voting for, who you are voting for, why you are voting, and do the right thing and cast your ballot. Be an American patriot and vote.
Impressive, right? Very impressive.
The great historian, Daniel J.
You can all watch that on repeat later. We've got it on YouTube for you. Don't worry. We've saved it there, but incredible messages, of course, to share with our community, and very, very impressive work to all of you. It was quite the fierce competition, and to come in as first place, that's certainly an achievement you should be proud of, and I'm sure your families are as well. We'd like to thank Mr. Colley for that video, as I shared. We've posted that, of course, on our YouTube channel. We hope you will view it and share it. We'd also like to thank Ms. Jennifer Mundy and Ms. Michelle Bentavina in the Curriculum and Instruction Department. Of course, they helped to coordinate the Patriotic Speech Contest, so we certainly appreciate all the hard work that goes into that. A number of other dedicated volunteers, as I mentioned, our esteemed panel of judges, and then we know that it takes an awful lot of support from the site level, our principals and our assistant principals, and I know we've got some principals here with us this evening, Mrs. Bagwell, Mrs. Swarstead, and Mr. Ballier. So thank you so much for being here today. Did I miss someone? No, okay. For being here tonight. So we really appreciate you coming and the support that you give. We've got families here. I know that you're all beaming with pride, and I saw many of you there for the contest as well. Students, if you'd help me with this, families, could you stand, and students, can you give your family a round of applause for all the support they gave you through this process? And I'm going to ask our four winners, if you can come on up here next to me. I know our governing board members may have some words that they want to share with you, and they may want to congratulate you on your achievements. So don't be shy. We know you've got the public speaking skills. You probably could have led this recognition. But governing board member Mrs. Pingarelli, I will turn them over to you.
Thank you very much. This evening, let's start with Mrs. Doan.
Well, I don't want to turn my back, so I'll just sit around like this. Congratulations to you all. That was very good. The little clips picked, the little cherry-picked parts. But I'm sure the whole speech was very inspiring. We do live in a great country. We do live in the greatest country in the world. And we live in a time when all things seem, that the future is laid out ahead of you. And I appreciate your words, and I encourage you to not only use them to win a contest, And you did that very well, and it seemed to me that it was coming from your heart. But be sure you're committed to that, and continue on that path. That was very excellent, and it's a core value that can carry you throughout your life. So thank you very much for your words and for your diligence, and to your families for supporting you. And I'm very impressed, and I hope you continue with your public speaking and that kind of thing. That helps you in many areas of life. So thank you very much.
Ms. Underhill?
Yes, I'm just so proud of all of you and impressed by your bravery to be able to do that. But it's not just your speaking skills, but it's what you said. You know, your words were truly inspiring, and I hope that all of you, you're leaders just in what you've done. So I hope that you'll continue to speak up and follow your own advice, you know. I do have to give a special shout out for Allie, because she was in my 3rd grade class. So way to go. But I'm just really, really proud of you guys, and believe in yourselves and keep speaking up. You're doing a great job. Thank you, and thank you, families. Great job.
Mr. Sandoval?
No, agreed. Congratulations. Very inspiring, Allie. I think you brought up education and the importance of knowledge. Absolutely, it allows us to achieve more. And Frank, I believe you brought up the vote. You know, it's important, and you're right. And, you know, democracy is not a spectator sport. It's important to, you know, act. And it's important to communicate that message to everybody, not just your peers, but even, you know, to adults, that in order to impact change, yes, you have to act, and yes, absolutely vote. So thank you all. Congratulations. Congratulations to your families, to the sites, and the principals that are here, and your teachers. Very inspiring, and I always say it is an honor to be here and serve each and every one of you. So thank you.
And Mrs. Sehar Martinez, can you hear us? Would you like to?
I sure can. I cannot see you all, but congratulations to the hard work that you've put into this. And I would share the same sentiment as my fellow governing board members, that your voice is just as imperative as everyone else's. And I hope that you don't wait for the annual speech contest to continue to elevate the voice of the students. When we talk about inclusive, we also mean inclusive and diverse thought. And your experience and your time in your life is just as important as anybody else in our district. So thank you for all your hard work, and keep doing what you're doing.
Thank you very much. I just wanted to say also congratulations, and parents, well done. You have some excellent students, excellent children, and Mr. Beard, I was impressed with all of yours, but in this time that we live in now, voting is something that people take for granted, and to have an educated voting pool is, I think, something that's extremely important today. So, but thank you all for coming, and thank you for the parents. And at this, actually, Ms. Ari, do we need to take pictures, or?
We have thoroughly photographed them outside.
Okay, I wasn't sure if we needed to
prior to
raise-
the start of the meeting. So we've got their photo, and we will be sharing it wildly on social media.
Okay.
So we hope that you will all share it as well, and you can use hashtag Peoria Unified Pride. But you all can sit back with your families. One more round of applause for our students. You can sit back. And we do have one additional recognition this evening, if I might, Mrs. Pingarelli. We have, if you're not already familiar, we have something that's pretty incredible in our midst and within our district. We received word recently that we have a Flynn Scholar. And for those of you who don't know what that means, I'm going to tell you a little bit more about it, but it is one of the most prestigious merit scholarships in the nation. The Flynn Foundation's goal is to develop enriched educational experiences and expand scholarship recipients' lives and career options while creating and challenging educational environments, and to allow students across the nation to attend the most selective colleges. We are really, really proud to have, as I said, a Flynn Scholar from Ironwood High School. He is a very dedicated student. Besides being a Flynn Scholar, he's also a National Merit Scholar in the International Baccalaureate Club in fact, he's the president, and Mr. Ironwood this year. He's one of only 23 high-achieving students in Arizona to receive this most prestigious scholarship. So that is really, really quite the accomplishment. I would like to introduce, and I'm going to ask him actually to rise and come join me, Mr. Joe Thomas from Ironwood High School. If we can give him a big round of applause. And you all younger students might note that Mr. Thomas has informed me that he was also in the Patriotic Speech Contest maybe 4 or 5 years ago. So certainly that's something to look forward to, right, as you move on from elementary to high school, some other opportunities that you have. But I'll share also that as a Flynn Scholar, Joe will receive an all-inclusive package at an Arizona public university that includes tuition, room and board, as well as an opportunity to study abroad. This scholarship also provides an opportunity for a 3-week intensive overseas seminar, at least one additional study-related travel in the U.S. or internationally, mentorship, invitations to cultural events, and membership of a community that is, of course, comprised of other high-achieving scholars like him. So we are just so proud of you, Joe, and this remarkable achievement. Before I turn him over to you, board members, I do want to introduce a very special team that's here and that supports him, his family. If we can have you stand, you must be beaming with pride. You can see it from here. And I know many of our board members have likely come to know the incredible Miss Chris Kuchka, the International Baccalaureate Coordinator at Ironwood High School. Congratulations. And you've just got some incredible scholars coming out of Ironwood High School, of course, over the years, and now Joe Thomas joins that rank. So, board members, it's our pleasure to introduce him to you, and certainly we know he stands for any comments that you might have.
Okay, thank you very much. We'll start with Ms. Underhill.
Well, Joe, congratulations. I mean, that's huge. I know that as that scholarship comes out across, the state, people are always looking at it, and that's a huge accomplishment. So well done, Mom and Dad. And I know that you'll be able to do great things. So take advantage of all those opportunities. I'm sure you will. You look like the kind of person that already has. So good job and congratulations.
Thank you.
Mr. Sandoval?
Yes, Mr. Thomas, congratulations. If you could speak a little bit, just since we have some of your younger peers here, about even your discipline and potentially habits, that you may have on a daily basis to get through the day, overcome challenges, et cetera. Can you speak to your day a little bit?
Sure, Mr. Sandoval. I think the biggest part of it is to just actively engage in school, with the opportunities around you, clubs, sports. And don't do nothing that you're forced to do, because then it doesn't pan out and you won't enjoy it. But if you find opportunities that you enjoy, grasp it and go deep into it. For example, a club or a sport, or even just a community organization you particularly enjoy doing, and that'll lead the way forward. Another thing is always try to be learning, reading, that sort of thing, because it just expands your knowledge and helps you become a better person and help you serve your community better. And also, I think above all, just be ready to work hard always and don't give up. And I know that sounds stereotypical, but if you really try to power through issues with the help of those around you, you'll find you can overcome a lot of them and reach a better place than you are already.
Yeah, very good. Thank you. And lastly, I just want to say thank you. Thank you for your perseverance, your hard work, your resilience, and becoming and really striving to become, the best version of yourself that you possibly can. So thank you for that. Thank you, Chris. Thank you to your family very much. Very proud of you. Congratulations.
Thank you, sir.
Mrs. President Ceja Martinez, would you like to say something?
I just like to say thank you for being a good role model for your peers around you. That with hard work, it does pay off. I do have one question. When you take a look at your journey, if you can think of one obstacle that we can assist with as a leadership team and governing board, how can we help future students as an obstacle that you faced and remove it?
I'd say one of the bigger obstacles is most likely getting information getting information out about different opportunities around the district, around schools, in terms of like club activities, what you can do to better yourself. Because a lot of the times students often have to ask these or hear about it from friends or hearsay in the hallways. So definitely, some form of print or online publication where you could look up, oh, these are the clubs and events that take place around my school.
Thank you very much, and that would be very helpful as we move into the next quarter to discuss student success. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Ms. Dillon?
Well, I would like to say congratulations, and I like what you said about enjoying your work, basically. I have noticed, through my life that when you do something under duress, you do the least you can to get by. But if you put yourself in, and you will find yourself enjoying your accomplishments, right? And your knowledge, your understanding that you gain. And I thank you for pointing that out, and that's a very good and mature attitude to have, that, hey, I need to do this for myself, and I'm going to enjoy the process. And I appreciate that, and I appreciate your hard work and dedication, and also of your family. Congratulations, and tear it up.
Thank you, ma'am.
And I just wanted to say that with the cost of college these days, and we've put 2 through college, that your parents are probably ecstatic that of your hard work, and it's helping you, but it's also helping them. And I just wanted to know, do you know kind of what career path that you're looking into now?
I would definitely like to work for the State Department, go that route, possibly have a diplomat, ambassador, that level of work. So probably a lot of education. I'm going to ASU, so probably educate myself in economics, history, global politics, which happens to be the areas I enjoy. So that worked out, trying to find a career that matched my interests.
Yes. Well, congratulations, and thank you for coming. Thank everybody for coming this evening, all the students and the parents. We appreciate it. And at this point, generally, we say that the parents and the students can go if they would like to. If they would, it'll get a little bit drier, and so probably now is a good time to leave if you'd like to. Unless, Ms. Aries, did you have anything else?
One more.
I'm sorry.
I did. I'm sorry. And this one
I'm
could
sorry.
probably use extra hands clapping, so I'll probably need the extra energy from the students in the room if I could. If you all can glance backward, you'll see Miss Erin Dunzy. And I want to point out that this evening is her last governing board meeting with us. For those of you who don't know her, she is our district's media relations specialist. She's on our communications and public relations team. And you don't often see her standing right up here, but the work that she does behind the scenes is just remarkable. She's been an incredible part of the Peoria Unified School District, passionate and dedicated for the last 8 years. We are going to greatly miss her, but we wish her well in all her future endeavors as she's leaving us at the end of this week. So thank you, Erin, on behalf of our district for all you have contributed. And thank you, students. That clapping wouldn't have been the same without you. So thank you.
And sorry, Ms. Aries, I didn't know. I'm sorry. I didn't know. Okay. All right. All right, is everybody ready to keep on going? We have one board member that will be back shortly. So the next item is 5.2, board recognitions. Let's see, let's start with Mr. Sandoval. Well, I always catch you when you're drinking, I'm sorry.
Thank you. So being that we're in the middle of Public Schools Week, I just want to say thank you to everybody in this room, to our entire teachers, staff, et cetera. Just again, what you do every day to inspire hope in our students, what you do every day to think differently and innovatively to make sure that, we're thinking ahead, what's, maybe coming around the corner to ensure that we're always putting our current and future students in a position to be successful. So thank you very much for what you do, and you're just tireless. And again, it is an honor to sit up here, every other week. It is an honor to spend time with you in between board meetings. It's just, I've always said it, I've benefited from, passionate and caring, teachers, staff, coaches, and, they continue to shape who I am today and what you do, for all of our students. You never know when it ends. So thank you.
Ms. Underhill?
I would just echo what David said with Public Schools Week being an important thing. And just, I guess I also want to give a shout out to our admin staff for all the work that you're doing on the strategic plan, because that's a really big thing to kind of keep us moving forward, and just appreciate the time, because I know you're all kind of doing multiple jobs, but thank you very much.
President Ceja Martinez?
At this time, no.
And I do not have anything, but before, actually, we move on, we are missing 2 board members, so.
Well, then, do you mind if I jump back in?
No, please go ahead. Be a time filler.
I just want to say briefly, I did watch the study session on stewardship and resources, and I agree with the hard work and dedication that my fellow board members shared. Kudos to all of you. It's definitely, at the beginning of this process, you guys as a team walked us through a timeline, and you have kept to that timeline, and recognizing that we have had some challenges together as a district, but we've walked through them together, and as a result, you are on track for the first phase of our strategic plan. So kudos to all of you, and hopefully at the end of this board meeting, you guys all go out for ice cream or dinner.
I won't tell you what Mr. Savoy said. He doesn't have a mic. It was pleasant. Ms. Stone, do you have anything under board recognitions? I don't. You don't, okay. I guess we'll move on to the next one. Pardon? Or, you know what, I'm sorry, Mr. Savoy. Would you like to jump in? We need to. I was going to say kill a few minutes, but that's not really.
Well, just to help with the time filler, just real quick, a recognition about Ironwood High School. We had 2 students who had this incredible opportunity for an all-expense-paid trip to Johns Hopkins University in Maryland. And how did that happen? Well, they participated in an essay project, and they were selected. There were only, I believe, about 20 students from across the country, 4 in Arizona, and they were 2 of them. And those 2 students are Eric Unsworth and Damian Cano. So it was a great trip. It reminded me of what Mr. Thomas spoke about, the student Joe, about hard work, keep learning, reading, and it sounds like that's what those 2 students did with their essay project. So thank you for letting me share that.
Thank you. All right, then let's move on to 6.1. I take it we have no slips for public comment? Michelle's. Since the room is bare, I take it no. Okay, so let's move on to 7, which is the consent agenda. Does any board member need to pull any items from the consent agenda? President Ceja Martinez?
None at this time.
Okay. All right, so hearing none, I would need a motion and a second to move to approve the consent agenda.
I move that we approve the consent calendar as presented.
Second.
All right, since in this format, we're going to take a voice vote, so all in favor say aye.
Aye. Aye.
That was loud, Mrs. Sarah Martinez. All opposed, nay? Okay, the ayes have it, 5-0. All right. Yes.
Ms. Pangarelli,
Mm-hmm.
I gather my voice carries from over here.
It does, it carries even louder than when you're here in person.
No, that's not quite.
Okay. All right. Sorry, I haven't done this in a while, so it's taking me a little time. All right, so we are at 9.1, which is, sorry, let me get my, 9.1, consideration of the approval of the issuance of district or DAC administrative contracts for the 2019-2020 school year. On this one, I would like to start it off. I did write my thoughts down because it's a little bit, there's been a little comments, let me just go through with my thoughts I had written down. First, I wish to ensure administrative staff that I understand their sense of urgency for the governing board to approve their administrative contracts. However, it is equally important that this process be done correctly, which includes the correct language as advised by our board attorney, and demonstrates the governing board's commitment to thoroughly review contract language and documentation. This is an important part of our governance responsibilities. Based on discussions I've had with our board president and our board attorney at the request of the board president, this information needs to be shared to all board members. Since this is a legal, personnel matter involving employees per statute, these discussions need to be conducted in executive session. Moreover, due to open meeting law, a board member can only speak with one other member of this board outside of public meeting, or it is a violation of open meeting law. I am confident that this agenda matter can be resolved quickly prior to the deadline, but must be done per statute and the laws of the state of Arizona. In speaking with our attorney, she is happy to resolve this with the district's attorneys to expedite this process. I think this process is or has been started today. Regarding this agenda item specifically, I'm concerned that the agenda planning process is not following the intent of our policy, where the superintendent is in collaboration with the board president and clerk is followed. This is policy BED-BA. This situation must not occur again. Therefore, in order to equally inform all board members of contracts and personnel issues, I make a motion to table this agenda item and place it on the April 11th regular board meeting and convene an executive session prior to April 11th to allow administration time to modify these contracts.
I second that.
All right. So let's start discussion. Mr. Sandoval, would you like to?
Sure, I guess I mean, obviously, there's much that I don't know that you just expressed that I need more information on, but I think, you know, this line item and recommended action from administration is no different than what it has been in the past. You know, they're making a recommendation for us to approve the renewal of, you know, a list of individuals who are appropriately certified, you know, and certainly adept and have the acumen to perform their duties at a high level in their roles. So for me, that's what we're focused on, and you know, and I'm in support of approving this particular line item. Now, if there are issues from a personnel level, I think we have a process there that, we need to follow, that, is outside of, this particular line item in my mind. And again, I'm saying this, without having, further details, but for me, as it reads, I'm in support of this particular, of approving this particular agenda item.
Okay. Mrs. Underhill?
I guess I would say in agreement with Mr. Sandoval that this is kind of news to me, so I wasn't aware that there was any issues with the contract language. I guess my question would be, have the contracts changed all that much prior to this year?
Mr. Savoy, I believe, or Dr. Davidson, I believe they have not changed, but from my understanding, they have been incorrect for a period of time, according to our board's attorney.
Mrs. Pangarelli, members of the board, the contract language was approved by this governing board on December 11th, 2018. So the governing board had an opportunity to review all contracts for certified staff and administrative staff. Those contracts were vetted by our district attorney from Human Resources, which we have used for probably the last decade. So the board did see those contracts. The language has not changed significantly from year to year. It focuses on things of dates of employment, dates of the contract, liquidated damages, responsibilities, et cetera. The piece in question that Ms. Pangarelli refers to has to do with statutory language in the Arizona Revised Statutes, Section 15, which is the education chapter, Section 503. As a district, we have always operated under the guise or the guidance of treating all of our administrators the same, meaning that some of our administrative positions require a certificate to hold that position, a certificate from the Arizona Department of Education in administration or teaching credential. Some of our administrative positions do not require that. And so what we have always done as a district is we treat all of our administrators the same. What does that mean? The only protection in 15503 is that if you're a certificated employee, meaning a teacher or an administrator in a position that requires a certificate, is that you're guaranteed certain notification timelines that are statutorily guided. Primarily April 15th. If you're not going to renew someone for the next year, you must let them know by April 15th. All certificated employees need to have a contract by May 15th in their hand. So it appears what the crux is do we treat all of our administrators the same, or do we decide that administrators who are not required to have a certificate have a different type of contract, is really in essence what it is. One other caveat I'll just mention to this conversation, I've had a chance to talk with Mrs. Ceja Martinez, is that one of the things that Ms. Myers mentioned earlier tonight was about our salary compensation review, very extensive, looking at our salary comparisons with all districts. But phase 2 of that, which she just briefly mentioned tonight, was job descriptions. Well, why are job descriptions important? Because job descriptions identify what positions must have a certificate. And then just my last comment would be is the challenge for us, the reason why we treat all administrators the same is that we have people in positions whose job may not require a certificate, but they do have a certificate. So then the question is, even though it's a job that doesn't require a certificate, but that person has a certificate, legally must we follow 15503? So that's just a little background. I didn't want to get too long-winded, but I think that's really what the crux is. And this came up at the last minute. We've followed this process for years and years and years. We're not in violation because it doesn't say that you can't allow administrators who don't have a certificate the same protections. But it does say that you must offer these protections to people who do have a certificate. That's the guidance that we received from our attorney as well. So hopefully that helps a little bit.
So just to be clear, I mean, the administration's recommendation is to renew contracts for individuals who are appropriately certified and certainly, educated and adept at, performing their roles in the seats that they're assigned to.
Mr. Sandoval, members of the board, the list tonight, I believe, contains 28 names. Those names are being brought forward to the board. We are confident that these folks are competent and skilled and properly assigned in the appropriate role. All the site administrators have already received their contracts.
And I think for me, going back to your statement around, we treat all our administrators the same. I think even from a timing regard, it's becomes for me an equity issue that, a certain employee group doesn't have their, renewals or their contracts yet where everyone else does. For me, it's, individuals can make their own interpretations of what's being said, and, I would hate for anybody to take it wrongfully, but I think we should treat all of our associates the same as it relates to contract renewals.
Mrs. Doan?
Well, I have to ask, are we in violation of a law or regulation with the contracts the way they are?
I would need to have our governing board lawyer and why I brought this out, for us all to get together in executive with the governing board attorney, so she can explain it and that the contracts could be changed appropriately before they go out. There's a deadline of April 15th. If we had an executive session after everybody gets back, the contracts could be or would be changed. Or we have an executive session. The board attorney gives us her recommendation. If we accept it, the language would be changed and it would be out in plenty of time for the April 15th deadline, if not before.
Excuse me, Ms. Pingarelli and members of the board, depending upon the date of that executive session and if it was the board's decision to ask for change in contract language and issuance of contract, I do believe you would then need to also consider having an additional meeting of the governing board, a regular meeting of some kind, because we would have to also then not only approve contract language, but then we'd also have to have the agenda item to look at the rehire list as well as we're asking tonight. So there would be certainly some significant timelines we would have to look at if that's how that played out. If I may, Ms. Pingarelli, to Ms. Doan's question about breaking a law, Ms. Doan, as Ms. Pingarelli said, there was some guidance given by the attorney that the board often uses. We then cross-referenced. She actually spoke to the attorney that we use as well, and we had that information given to us today. As Mr. Savoy said, the timeline's been very tight, but we certainly wanted to be able to come today and share with you that the guidance we have received is that we are not breaking any laws. It really goes back to what Mr. Savoy spoke to, as where do we stand on honoring those perhaps extra protections as provided by the Arizona Revised Statute for all administrators, whether they were fully certified like myself or Mr. Savoy, or maybe they didn't have the State Department of Education certificate and were simply classified, but also some of our employees hold credentials that are appropriate for their jobs, like an MBA, for example. Ms. Myers is an accountant, for an example. That's a particular credential she holds. Oh, excuse me, certified public accountant. Sorry, that was my informal register there. But certainly, it really boils down to where we stand. We were told today we are not violating any law.
So is it your understanding, Beverly, that we are we affording people protections they don't have to have, and that's the problem?
I would need to have the governing board's attorney explain things. I mean, I don't want to, I'm not a lawyer. If I were, I would be making a lot more money than I am now. So That's why I had said what I had said, is to have the entire board be able to sit down in executive session, and that's the only way that we can, and have the governing board's attorney give her perspective.
So Dr. Davidson, our existing contracts are not put in the district in an adverse situation legally. My assumption is we've had our legal team look at our contracts to confirm such. So, that said, again, I'm just trying to understand the outcome of what the outcome is being looked for here. It's in my mind, we have assurance from our leadership team that these contracts are indeed valid and appropriate and within the legal realms of the district. Again, I'll say it again. I think it's a line item that I absolutely approve, and would like the district to move forward with.
President Ceja Martinez, yes.
At this time?
Now I was going to recognize you.
Okay, thank you very much. I appreciate the dialogue. I recognize the challenges by moving this agenda item to the April 11th board meeting as stated by our deputy superintendent and our HR director. This motion and time frame does align to state statute guidelines. So the board does have the authority and autonomy to make employee contract decisions within the right time frame. We're not asking for an extension. The information that the board president, myself, has been privy to should be accessible and heard by all governing board members in order to make an informed decision. Now, we don't want to hold any staff member back from an opportunity that may suit their personal professional goals, but I would kindly request some patience and understanding while we ensure we are taking every precaution, one, to reduce risks and liability our district may face with the current language. Now, I've heard statements such as, this is the way we've done it in the past, and if I can recall, Mr. Sandoval, you have stated that we don't want to do things just because they have been done in the past. We want to be innovative. But the other part of that is we also want to be risk adverse. As a district, as a governing board, we have received recommendations from our administration that we have also have to rectify, assuming that the trust was there in the contract language. And I remind you of the old Challenger Center and the situation we're still dealing with. So the information that Mr. Savoy brought up, is this a competency question? That is not in our scope of governance. It is a legal contract binding document that is the responsibility of the governing board to bring forward and to make sure we are not putting our district at risk for all employees and ultimately impacting our students.
So with that said, yes, I agree, easy is the breeding ground for complacency, and we shouldn't just do things because we've always done them in a certain way. However, with regard to this slide item, I think, we've heard from our administration team, our leadership team, that, we are absolutely, our contracts are in line with, with our attorneys. And I guess my question would be, knowing that we approved the language merely 3.5, 4 months ago, what has changed over that time frame?
And that is a valid point. We did not take that extra step, and I will take responsibility in that, of sending the district language to the governing board's lawyer. As a result of doing our due diligence, the request was sent over to our district governing board lawyer and was reviewed and was communicated that we should convene executive session to go over the risk and liabilities that we are putting our district in a situation in the future. I know that as of this evening, 5 p.m., I spoke to our district lawyer again, and at that point, she had made contact with the district HR lawyer, and there was no verbal communication with our district's HR lawyer with our administration. From my understanding, if there was support for our district administration, then I would presume that they would have contacted our HR lawyer. But at this time, I would think in best practice that we have an informed board making a decision based on legal practices, state statute, and reducing risk.
And I just want to remind the board that the board has the governing board attorney to guide us. Administration has attorneys to guide the administration. In an ideal world, both would be the same and have the same goals or outcomes. But in the past, we've seen that the governing board does need their own attorney with issues that we've had. And I would highly recommend that we do have a governing board attorney. She has made recommendations, but that has to be looked at and reviewed in executive session.
I guess for me, I mean, my concern is that there is disparity between the governing board attorney and the district attorney. I mean, when we talk about the law of the land or law, you know, regardless of what law school they went to, it doesn't change, right? That said, I mean, you know, again, it's, for me, it's, I don't have substance to be able to not approve this line item. I think, you know, we have a leadership group that we trust, that is capable, that understands the importance of putting our district in a position to be successful and risk adverse. So, you know, again, with that said, I'm in full support of approving this line item.
Well, I just want to remind you, Mr. Sandoval and the entire board, that the board members are voted in by the community. We take votes. We look at the data, hopefully everybody does. If we were going to just rubber stamp everything an admin would say, that's not doing our job. A lot of times they're in alignment, but we need to take a deep dive in them. And I believe that the only way to rectify this, and it is a couple of weeks delay, is to have the governing board's attorney speak to all board members. And then the individual board member can decide to take the recommendation or not. But if we don't listen to what she has to say, then we are just rubber stamping, and I don't rubber stamp.
Well, neither do I, and I think that certainly can be shown. You know, I think we're certainly taking in the information, not only from our team, but from our legal team. Otherwise, you know, these contracts would not read as they do today. That said, Corey, I think you had something.
Well, Ms. Pangarelli, members of the board, just a couple points of clarification. We are aware today that our district HR attorney did have contact with the board's attorney, and then we also had follow-up with that person. So there was conversation today between both. I want to make sure that everyone's aware of that. Two things I would just remind the board of. Contracts went out to all of our certificated employees, I think the day after March 1st. March 1st was the day they went out, so it's longer than just a 2-week delay. These 28 individuals will be coming up on a month and a half, where they're making decisions about their family and concern for their future, and whether they have a job for next year. District administration has brought forth those people as recognized to be renewed for employment in our district, and those contracts were approved by the governing board on December 11th, 2018. And at this last hour, it just seems unnecessary. I will also say that I've had contact with 4 other districts, colleagues, similar positions. Each of those districts offer 1 contract for their administrative staff and 1 contract for their teachers. And I did that just as a gauge, you know, what would be the big difference. So I'm just trying to work towards our administrative staff that are working hard to keep our district moving along.
And the delay I was referring to is not from our last contracts that we had approved, but between this point and moving forward.
I guess my big question still is, because I'm more of in alignment with approving this line item, is why is this becoming an issue now? I mean, we've had the same contracts the last 2 years. They were reviewed in December, and it wasn't a problem. We did get a couple emails from other individuals today stating that they were hoping that we wouldn't approve these contracts. So I guess my concern is it really about the contract language, or is there something else going on that we are trying to delay these contracts from being approved?
I actually haven't even looked at my emails. I was so busy at work, so I haven't looked at what you're referring to. No, I mean, the contracts have been looked at and were given to the governing board's attorney, and the recommendation that she has made is to go into executive session where she can make the recommendation. So as far as I'm concerned, the rest, actually all of us, don't have all the knowledge that she can provide. So by accepting the contracts as is, we are going to go ahead and do them for another year incorrectly. So I know it would be a couple of weeks delay, but that's my feeling. Is there any more discussion? Mrs. Sejar-Martinez, you're still on the line?
I'm still here.
Yeah, I guess for me, my ask is this, Dr. Davidson, Mr. Savoy, leadership, if we approve these contracts today, are we putting the district in a risk-adverse or a situation that would put us in a legal adverse scenario?
Mr. Sandoval, members of the board, community, my understanding after speaking to the attorney that we often use for human resources concerns was that we are not putting our district at risk. It really, again, boils down to, do we provide the possible provisions and safety net of sorts for an administrator, no matter if they're certified by the state of Arizona or not? Do we provide them that same due process at whether, when you really look at the contract, the revised statute has talked about at termination, not even really at issuance of contract, but it really does boil down to the timelines that are provided, as Mr. Savoy spoke to, 415 or 515, whether or not we provide that for all administrators or just those certified by the state. So that's really the issue at hand, at least from my understanding. There may be more, I don't know, but that's the understanding I received today.
Gotcha. So it doesn't put us at a risk-averse
We wouldn't
scenario.
know unless we actually listen to our governing board attorney.
Well, once again, the attorney has reviewed these contracts.
But yeah, I
So,
know it's not our attorney, but.
I'm
Thank
going
you,
to say,
Dr.
I want to say, I am for approving, I'm for everyone on that list getting their contract.
Mm-hmm.
I think nobody in this room is wanting to exclude anybody from getting their job, and that can be public knowledge. The contracts are coming to all of these people. I'm comfortable with the contracts the way they are, but I'm not comfortable with not having it unanimous, with having people with legal questions about them. I think that if our board president and board clerk have legal questions and we have not spoken to our attorney, the community is going to wonder what's wrong with these contracts. They're going to say, what is going on here? I I hate the delay. I think maybe we could try to move the timetable up and hold a special meeting as quick as possible.
Well,
For this.
we have people out of town, Ms. Underhill, President Sahar Martinez, and Mr. Sandoval. I think Mrs. Sahar Martinez is back. I'm not sure, when are you back?
April 1st. I believe all three of us, Ms. Underhill, Mr. Sandoval, and I will be back April 1st.
And if I'm not mistaken, our governing board attorney has given dates that she would be available.
Yes.
Okay. And I don't know what those
So-
are.
Ms. Stone and Mr. Sandoval, Ms. Underhill, we did try to work through a timeline, and this conversation did come up prior to March 14th as well. Not specifically in relation to ARS 15503, which is the state statute we're referencing. It was, I asked for some research in regards to certificated and non-certificated employees, and to this date, I have not received it. So this conversation did start prior to that. The information as well did start with our current superintendent. This is the first time in history of Peoria Unified, as far as back as we know, that the superintendent has split the contracts. The principals and teachers' contracts have been approved and are in good order. Our superintendent gave us direction way back when to have this contract of administration be decided at a different time. As a result of that research, we're in this current and present situation.
Dr. Davidson, what's the difference between our site administrator contracts and our district administrating contracts, the language?
Mr. Sandoval, we both received the same contract, so it's the same language.
Same language. So
Yes, sir.
we have the same language already approved out there with some.
That is correct, sir, yes.
And to your point, Mr. Sandoval, that conversation will come up at a later date. That information has already been approved.
So with that
The
said,
contract.
I think, again, I'm supportive of approving this line item, knowing that we're having a conversation later about these other contracts. We should just include these contracts in there as well.
I would agree with that. If we've already got contracts that are out there, then we're going to have two different types of contracts. Not sure.
Well, the motion that is on the table then is to table this agenda item until April 11th, until the regular board meeting on April 11th, and to convene an executive session prior to the 11th to give administration time to modify the contracts if the board desires after they speak with the governing board attorney. So that is a motion and a second. So if there's no other discussion.
I do have another question.
Okay.
The deadline's the 15th?
Pardon?
The deadline for getting the contract out is the 15th?
Is April 15th.
That's
and
cutting it
everybody's-
very close.
That is correct.
Yes, and everybody will be back in town on April 1st. And I don't know what our governing board's attorney's availability is. She has given it to, I think, Michelle. So I don't know how much, and like I said, she has to advise us on how much needs to be changed. So I'm assuming if it were to go through this way, an executive session would have to be followed by a special meeting to approve it, to get it along quickly. And then HR would make changes so that we could approve it on the 11th.
I have her dates of availability. It's April 2nd through April 10th.
Okay, so if this were to go through, I would suggest it being earlier, more towards the 2nd, 3rd, or whatever, everybody can get together, but that would be a moot point if this motion doesn't pass.
Are we likely to lose anybody over this?
I would hope not,
I think,
because it's meant to correct the language in the contracts
yeah.
and not to penalize.
Well, yeah,
People.
I don't want anybody feeling uncertain, as was mentioned earlier, about their contract. The contract is coming.
Mhm.
Well, I think that level of uncertainty has a high probability in light of the fact that we have contracts out there that have the exact same language.
I would agree, and it's also kind of hiring time for other districts, so
Yeah.
if people are uncertain, they may be looking.
We have over 200 districts in the state of Arizona, so surveying 2 or 3 does not even give enough support in that data that that's a relevant survey of the contract language that's out there for the state of Arizona.
Mrs. Doan, members of the board, on that list of 28, 12 people are the people that currently are in positions that don't require a certificate. So this delay is really centered around that. Just to give you an idea of some of those jobs, they have to do with technology, food service, transportation. I already said
I
transportation.
did read the list.
Yeah,
I mean,
you saw,
know.
okay, good. I just wanted to make sure that you had a chance to see that. And so, will we lose people? We could. I mean, we certainly, I think the message is about faith and trust in our staff. That's what I think they're concerned about.
Yeah.
Well, to me, it's not for faith and trust. It's doing things correctly, doing things lawfully. And if our governing board's attorney has suggestions or recommendations for a change, I would like to see them done this year.
We don't have a 3-year-old in the room. Is there any way that we can send a letter of intent to these people, for them to have in their hands to know that the job is theirs? Would that be?
Ms. Doan, I mean, I believe that certainly could happen if that was the board's wish. A letter of intent is not a legally binding document.
I know.
It goes back to using Mr. Savoy's word. It does demonstrate good faith, however, but certainly is not legally binding from our end or on their end either. So I don't know if that would really get you the result that you're hoping for.
You know the saying, though, trust but verify. It just burns me that it's taken so long, that it will take the time it takes. I want to do it right. I don't want this coming back to, okay, now that it's been brought up, it is our responsibility to correct things if they're incorrect. And we don't know because we don't know.
That's correct.
It's driving me nuts. I want to know now.
So where was our board attorney when we were approving site administration contracts?
Wait a minute.
Mrs. Seahar Martinez, did you get Mr.
I
Sandoval's?
addressed that. I did hear that question. And for me personally, as one governing board member, I take responsibility of not following through and asking for another pair of eyes to look through that. As a result of the experiences we had with contract language in our district, I did address, Mr. Savoy and I had a side conversation prior to March 14th to host an executive session. At that time, it was deemed unnecessary as a result of feedback from our board attorney. Then we are in the current situation that we're in. There's no right answer, Mrs. Savoy or Mr. Sandoval, that you're looking for. The fact is, and I've heard we've all said this before, now we know, now we're accountable. What are we going to do now with the information that we have? And sharing that information is challenging with open meeting law. I would have loved to have the opportunity, as Mr. Savoy did, to call all my fellow governing board members to explain how this unfolded and where we're at. But as a result of open meeting law, I can't do that. Hence why the executive session is so imperative that you hear the same information that I heard as well as Ms. Pangarelli.
Yeah, well, I think for me, the right answer or direction is, we have contracts that are out there and approved that have the same exact language that these contracts that we are being asked to approve have. And it sounds like we're having a subsequent conversation around those contracts. So, again, I think it should be no different here. I fully support this line item, and if we're having that subsequent conversation, then, we include these contracts in that dialogue as well.
All right, does any governing board member have any other comments, questions, concerns?
I would like to address some of the emails that were received. I spoke to Ms. Pallas Thompson, and she is in full support of this measure. So if anybody's listening that had doubts and was worried about her viewpoint on that, she asked me to say that she is in full support, so.
Thank you for that.
I have not talked to her for a while.
Per FMLA employment laws, I have, in my training that I've had in HR, I have refrained from speaking to our superintendent in regards to school district matters as a result of her situation. She should be respected with her time, so I have not addressed any of these issues.
Well, that wasn't a legal question for her. That was just, she wants these people. She wasn't talking about contract language.
I have had a conversation with our board attorney, and there is conversation going on, but again, as a result of executive session, I can't talk in public meeting about her specific situation.
All right. Any other comments, questions? Is everybody ready to vote? So the motion that I had made and Mrs. Sahar Martinez had seconded is to table this agenda item and place it on the 11th regular board meeting and to convene an executive session prior to the 11th. It looks like hopefully closer to the 2nd, 3rd of April, and listen to our governing board attorney, and then vote on the language, or not vote on it. It's however the board sees fit at that time. I would assume right after the executive session, so that there would be time to make changes by April 11th. So that is the motion on the table. It's been seconded. So we will take a voice vote. Ms. Stone, do you have any other?
Clarification from my mind. So we would meet with our attorney as soon as possible in April. And at that time, give direction whether or not to change the contracts?
I would have to, I would
We have to
assume
vote
that,
first.
I know, I would assume after we would talk to, it would have to be laid out, after talking to our governing board attorney and executive, then we would be able to come out in an open meeting and accept that
That needs to be
language.
included in the motion then, that we will come out and vote.
Okay. Then, well, I assumed it was understood, but I guess
No,
not.
you can't assume that.
Pardon?
It would have to be. Right, it would have to be a special board meeting. And it would have to be noticed.
Right.
That's when you can make a motion, depending on what you discuss in executive
I would like to have that in any case, in case we decided it was fine to approve them the way they were, we could go ahead and approve them at that point. Or we could advise to make changes. So we could do it quicker if we call a special board meeting. And we are going to have a 3-year-old at it. So we'll have to move quickly.
Well,
If I'm against it, but you have to know. It's a can of worms.
yes. All right, so your recommendation then is, or what you were talking about, is to table it. I just want to make sure that we can have one motion, if it passes or fails, what your feeling is, Ms. Doan.
My feeling is, I really want to pass it the way it is, but also that if the attorney has an issue with it, I need to know what her issue is, and I can't talk to her now. So,
Yes.
I'm explaining to her because she's going to make it, we'll get to it in a minute.
Well, Mrs. Doan's is part of a conversation.
What, we have, okay, I'm sorry, but only an idiot doesn't listen to their attorney, at least to hear what they have to say and then make their choice. I mean, I'm not calling anybody an idiot. I'm just saying that's what I've always been taught. If you have an attorney, you at least hear them out. So maybe I should, it is point of order for me to make a substitute motion. I could make a substitute motion. I move that we table this for tonight to meet with, schedule a session as soon as possible to meet with the board's attorney and
An
convene
executive session.
an executive session and convene a special session of the board immediately following the executive session to vote on this issue, and that letters of assurance be sent to everyone on this list.
The letters of insurance are not legally binding.
They're not. They're just to give the confidence for them to understand it's only language. It's not a delay because we disagree about the contract. I want, and so that would be my substitute motion, including those things.
Mrs. Sahar Martinez, did you hear Judy's substitute motion?
I did. So I just want to make sure, for clarity, Ms. Doan is asking to a substitute motion to table this item for a executive session, and following the executive session, we host a special board meeting to address this agenda item. And if this motion were to pass, that we communicate to the staff impacted that we're trying to rectify the situation as soon as possible?
Reasonable, I want it to include assurance of our intent to offer them a contract. Just checking the legal, it's just a legal issue with the wording. I don't think there's a problem.
Did you get that, Mrs. President Sahar Martinez?
Yes, and I'm just trying to understand, because then if that's where you're leaning towards, Ms. Doan, then it sounds to me that then what you're saying is just approve the contract language. I'm trying to bridge the gap of what was told in legal counsel by our legal counsel and your request, and it's hard to give you a definitive answer without you hearing all the facts.
That's why I'm saying table it until we speak to the attorney and then convene the special section immediately
Yeah,
following.
definitely. So I would say, because we don't know the outcome of what our legal counsel is going to provide and what the board's going to vote on and approve, because we
Well,
don't know.
There's no reason not to have a special
how-
session, because we can vote either way after. We got to vote
Correct.
on it.
Whatever the outcome and the recommendation is of our legal counsel, we may still have a split vote one way or the other. So I'm just concerned with another liability of giving reassurance of some sort, other than we are going to rectify the situation as soon as possible, and that we can guarantee. But we don't know the outcome of legal counsel, of what the board is going to vote on. And I think of past votes where we've had split votes come out of those sessions.
So Ms. Stone, what I'm hearing being said is that we're not 100% confident that our session with our attorney is solely focused on language.
Right.
That's not what I
Because otherwise,
understood.
we could be giving these reasonable assurances.
Yeah, because they're not legally binding anyway, but they just would be a show of good faith. I don't have a problem with that.
Well, I
I don't
think-
see why anybody would. Unless they don't want to hire the people on the list, and I certainly do.
Well, is there any other discussion before we take up Mrs. Jones'
No, nobody has
substitute
seconded it.
motion?
Doesn't it need a second?
Oh, it would need a second.
Okay.
All right, then we will go back to the original motion.
So the difference, can I just clarify? So the difference between the original motion and your motion was that you wanted to add the assurances.
And it would expedite it with a special board meeting instead of waiting till the 11th
Okay.
to vote.
Oh, yes.
That was my big point, but yeah.
I just have concerns. I don't know what the outcome is of that legal counsel executive session. And to give reassurance I'm not familiar with, that's my only concern. I don't know what I'm reassuring to.
It's just a letter of assurance that the job offer is coming. That the contract is going to come once we fix the language, if there's any language to fix. We better just.
And again,
vote.
I apologize for me not understanding, because I think about our past experiences where we've come out of executive sessions and we've had split votes. So reassuring one way or the other,
It's
that's
not
my only
reassuring,
concern.
it's only reassuring that the contract is coming. It's not reassuring what language is going to be in the contract. We're not voting, I mean, are you saying you're going to not vote to hire these people?
No, I'm not. I'm saying I don't know what I'm agreeing to in whatever issuance. And what if whatever is said and it's something that I don't agree with in the language, contract language, or the amounts, or I just don't know what I'm agreeing to. What I can guarantee is that we are going to resolve this situation as soon as possible, and we are going to come out of the board and present it to the public and the staff.
Okay, with my motion, then Michelle, give me some guidance or some assistance. If we were to go into executive and come out agreeing to change the contract language as a board, how fast or when is the appropriate time, because that wasn't in my motion, to convene a special session? What are our options?
Well, based on what Ms. Bateman said, her availability would be between the 2nd of April and the 10th.
Okay.
We have to hold a special board meeting. We would have the executive session start.
Mm-hmm.
Dependent on what is decided in that executive session, you would then come out into open session,
Mm-hmm.
and you could either agree to the contract language as presented, or you could make the motion then that the approval would happen at the April 11th regular meeting in order to get the timeframe of whatever may have to be changed of the language. But you would have it as a motion of what is decided, either yes or no, at an executive session.
Okay. So that then would not hold things up, is that correct? Then as you said, it can go to the 11th, it can be corrected and be voted on at the 11th. Is that, okay.
Or you can vote on it that night of your special meeting. Like, let's say you have executive session.
Mm-hmm.
Then in executive session, you decide that contract language may have to be changed or what have you. You would come out into your regular session, indicate that that is what is happening. That would be part of your motion, and then that would move forward.
Okay. But I'm trying to align it with my motion, because I did not have a meeting afterwards, which is what seems that Mrs. Doan wants to make sure the meeting is right after.
But I believe we didn't have a second on that motion.
Right.
So from what I see, then it's failed.
Right.
That motion failed.
Okay. Then we will go back to my motion. And you already have it down, so is to table it till the 11th and have an executive session before, discussing it with our board's attorney to change the language with the recommendation of the governing board's attorney, if the board approves that.
So Dr. D, if we, change contract language and we already have contracts that are out there with the same language, what's our obligation to update those contracts that have been approved?
Good question, Mr. Sandoval. I guess my response would probably would depend upon what the governing board chose to change and what the attorney that you used chose to share with you that was inappropriate or against the law. I mean, I think it would really depend on the substance of the change, and then we would have to make a decision as a team on how to move that forward.
Yeah, and I guess for me, and again, we've approved this language already. I know I'm being repetitive, but, I'm for approving, the renewal of these contracts, and, like I said earlier, it sounds like there's a subsequent meeting already kind of on the horizon to talk about our existing site administrator contracts, which these should be included. So, but anyway, thank you for your response.
All right. Are there any more comments, questions? President Sejar Martinez?
None.
Ms. Doan? No. Okay. Are we set? Then we'll take a roll call vote on the motion that I put on the table. All in favor, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
All opposed, say nay.
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 Motion fails 3-2. All right, let's move on to the next item.
Actually,
We have
I'd like to,
I'd like to make a motion that we approve the item as it was originally stated on the agenda, to approve the issuance of the district administrative contracts for the 2019-2020 school year.
second.
All right, we have a motion and a second to approve the administrative contracts. We'll do a voice vote again. All in favor, say.
I do have a comment on this one.
Yes?
One thing we have not addressed is the current language as it speaks that we approved unknowingly. The 1819 language is Mr. Savoy and Mr. Croto have contract language that we are required by ARS 15503 that they be considered in this contract. And I did discuss this with Mr. Savoy. So we are legally bound to offer them a contract as a result of that 2018-2019 language. Dr. Carter Davidson, I spoke to Mr. Savoy that he sent you his letter of retirement, and it has not formally been presented to the board. So we are supposed to include them by law and by the contract language we approved last year in this conversation.
Wait, Ms. President Sierra Martinez. We have.
Yes, but we're just.
Wait, no, wait, Mrs. Sierra Martinez, wait. Danielle, Ms. Aries had pointed out about not, you want to go through again, Mrs. Aries?
Wait.
Wasn't sure if Dr. Davidson's microphone wouldn't turn on. We cannot discuss a personnel matter in a public meeting.
That's
point of order, please.
Okay.
And just
Thank
also,
I apologize, and that is one of the reasons, hence why we need the executive session, because there's so much more to this dynamic that we don't have. And again, I apologize, but this motion is what you're going to bring forward is in regard to other issues. And that's all I have to say.
Well, we will wait for a moment for Ms. Doan to come back in, so we will have a full board before we take a vote on this. So, does anybody have a joke? President Sierra Martinez, we're just waiting for the full board to come back to vote on Mrs. Underhill's motion.
No, I appreciate the conversation again. It is very frustrating with a well-intended open meeting law in place to protect everybody and the community. It does make it very challenging.
It does, and I didn't catch that, so. And Mr. Savoy, can they stop and start, and so this doesn't look so, when they're recording, it doesn't look so, we're just kind of sitting here.
I know. Good. What are you doing?
When we went on intermission, I saw beautiful music and beautiful pictures of kids and staff.
Yeah, exactly. Interlude music.
That's true. It's not going to be a record meeting tonight, in terms of time.
It was a record study session.
It was that was very well organized. Ms. Myers was right on top of everything, so I appreciate it. We're almost set. Or not, sorry. That was not the pitter patter of, that was,
it's not a smoothie, Mr. Sandoval. Unfortunately, that small little packages. Yeah, right. Oh, that's worth it?
It's totally worth it. A lot of protein in there.
Peanut butter.
So good.
Did you say Oreos?
Yeah.
Are you kidding me? I would never eat. I always eat like after 9. It's starting to show, but you know. Well, you might have time to, or not. I was gonna say step out if you want. So we were just waiting until everybody got back. Everybody's here now. So let's start the meeting again. So the motion on the table from Ms. Underhill is to approve the issuance of the district administrative contracts for 2019-20 school year. We'll take a voice vote. All in favor, say aye.
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 All opposed, say nay.
Nay.
It passes 4-1. All right, next agenda item is the first reading and discussion pertaining to proposed governing board policy MB, sharing of data and external entities. Mr. Gay.
Ms. Pingarelli, members of the board, Madam President, by phone, and Mr. Savoy and the rest of the staff and a few guests that we still have in the room. Thank you for the opportunity to talk tonight about this policy. As you'll recall, at our last meeting, we talked about new policy section potentially containing several policies having to do with data management and security. And in fact, in the consent calendar this evening, the first of those was approved, policy MA. I did mention also that we're in conversation with the ASBA policy folks about whether there should be a new section for all of these policies or whether they should be somewhere else. And so the actual lettering of the policies will depend on that decision. I can tell you that I spoke with Mr. David DeCabuter at ASBA earlier today. They're of the opinion that all these policies should be in Section E and not a new section. Their primary reason for that thinking is that they want to stay in alignment with the National School Board Association Policy Manual. I still think it should be a separate section, and so we're still debating that. Nonetheless, they do like the policies that we're bringing forward. They think they're good wording. And so they, in particular, were, I think, happy to hear that the board was in favor of policy, what we're calling policy MA, which was the wording of which was approved this evening. And then tonight I'm going to talk about policy MB, and we'll call it MB for purposes of this conversation, the sharing of data with external entities. So briefly, what we'll talk about this evening is the alignment of that policy with the strategic plan, and then also with our nascent data leadership governance and security program. Also the need for board policy on sharing of sensitive data. Why do we need such policy? The intent and objectives for policy MB, the sharing of data with external entities. What do we want to accomplish with that policy? And then finally, we'll review the actual policy text. As we always do, we talked about alignment with strategic planning. This policy is about the sharing of external of our sensitive data, rather, with external entities, and so that clearly most closely aligns with our stewardship of community resources. That said, this is about sharing of sensitive data with external entities in those situations where that's required or necessary for the operation of the school district. And that sensitive data is often about people. So I believe also that there's a close alignment with safety and well-being within our strategic plan. I showed you this diagram last meeting, and this is just a graphical depiction, rather, of our new data leadership governance and security program. I did want to point out how this policy contributes to this program as well. First of all, it's clearly a part of our data security and cyber resilience component of this program. It's all about security and protection of our data. At the same time, it's clearly about a governance issue. It's the idea of we need to make sure that we're executing effective governance over this sensitive data. So it contributes to the governance part of data management. It also contributes to the data lifecycle management because the transfer and movement of data both within and without the district is a vital step of data lifecycle management and that whole process. So those three areas in particular, I could also say, I don't circle it, but at a technical and operational level, the policy gives direction to our work in the area of data integration and interoperability as well. So as we set up technical processes for sharing of data with external entities, then this policy informs us as how best we have to do that. So why do we need such a policy? Well, there are legitimate and ongoing operational requirements to share sensitive data with external entities. Sometimes those are legally required, and sometimes they're operationally necessary. Now, also, Board Policy MA, the one that was just approved in its second reading this evening, its overall intent and a specific objective within that policy that I'll read here in just a second does basically dictate the need for such a policy. And that item, that objective in Policy MA is to ensure that authorized access to district data and information resources and technology infrastructure by third parties is monitored and protected to the fullest intent of applicable statutes and this policy being Policy MA. Third, there are federal and state statutory requirements addressing privacy protection. So we have to make sure that we are in compliance with those. We are familiar with a number of those, FERPA being one, HIPAA being another, and there are others as well. And then finally, I would make the point that our current district policy manual, the ASBA model policy manual, as well as our own, currently does not address this topic in a comprehensive manner. Some policies address pieces of it, but not in a comprehensive manner. So that's why we feel that this policy is important. So as I tend to like to do, I want to talk about the proposed policy structure and its intent. First of all, it's important that the board make a clear statement that sensitive data and information, and this quote is a quote out of the policy itself, which the public will see in a moment when we bring it up, that this sensitive data and information may be shared with external entities only in circumstances in which there is a statutory or policy requirement or legitimate educational or operational need. Second part of our structure and intent is that this policy directs the superintendent to establish formal procedures for managing sensitive data sharing and establishes minimum requirements for those procedures. Requires specification of consequences for employee violations of the policy. Now we felt, and when I say we, I'm talking about our data management and cyber resilience team, we feel in general that it's very important that the board state emphatically that we must identify consequences when people don't comply with these policies. Now, everything you read in the trade literature, professional literature about cybersecurity, privacy protection, data management, it all says that one of the biggest reasons for failures, whether it's a data breach, a sharing of sensitive information, unauthorized sharing, whatever it is, often comes from employees or people involved not following policy. And so we believe it's important that we make that our staff understands that there are consequences in terms of not following the policy. And then obviously this is a rapidly changing environment. So we felt it was necessary for the board to state clearly that the staff needs to update as necessary this policy and the procedures that the superintendent directs to make sure that we have continued statutory compliance. So we have already begun work on complying with this policy that we have before you as first reading. First thing is that we have completed a compulsory contractual data sharing agreement, and we've had that reviewed by legal counsel to make sure that it is legally appropriate and that it could be held to be a contractually obligating set of language, and that will become Exhibit MB-E, Data Security and Confidentiality Agreement, assuming again that M is the policy letter that we end up being able to use, whatever it might be, EB-E, whatever it is. It will be an exhibit in our policy manual. That contract language is done at this time, been reviewed. The project team has prepared some draft procedures for executing this program. These are the procedures that the policy directs the superintendent to create. So we have a draft and we're reviewing those procedures right now. We're also, and by the way, there's two parts to this. So as this contractual language, the idea behind this is that going forward, every contract we have with a third party, let's say a vendor or another government agency with whom we have an IGA, whoever it might be, that this contractual language is part of that contract. And so that's going forward. Now, we also have those arrangements already with all kinds of vendors and IGAs and so forth. And so we're developing procedures right now for how do we go and retrofit all those contractual and intergovernmental agreements to incorporate this language. And so the team is working on those processes as well. And so now, with that said, I want to shift to the actual document itself. Let me bring that up. Gotta make sure I get the right one here. Yes. So this is the draft language, Policy MB, sharing of data with external entities. Now, of course, I won't read it to you, but I will touch on what each section is about. So the first section accomplishes that first intent, which is a clear statement by the governing board that sharing of sensitive data with external entities is a very important thing that we have to manage carefully, and it's only to happen when there's a statutory or regulatory requirement or there's an operational or educational need in order for that to take place. Then the second piece, second paragraph, is where the board is directing the superintendent to establish formal procedures for ensuring compliance with this policy by all staff. And it includes a specific requirement to have a legally binding agreement that must be executed between the district and any third party with whom we propose sharing data. And that's that exhibit that I mentioned just a little while ago that we have in place. And then it goes on to say that at a minimum, that agreement shall fully comply with all applicable federal, state, and local laws. That agreement shall specify requirements for the protection of shared data and information by the district and by that external entity. The agreement shall specify liabilities and remedies associated with any action by the external entity constituting a violation of the terms of that agreement. Then it goes on to say that district procedures shall also specify consequences and remedies for any district employee who violates the procedures or the intent of the policy. And then finally, instructs the superintendent to ensure that the district staff keeps the policy and the procedures current with changes in state and federal statutes, et cetera, that affect this particular area. So that is the policy in its draft form at this time, and I will stand for questions.
All right, Mr. Down, or excuse me, Mr. Sandoval.
You know, as you're reading through this, and it's very comprehensive and redundant in a good way, meaning, you know, it definitely protects the district. And as you're going through it, I'm trying to poke holes in it, but it seems to be pretty complete. So I don't have any questions other than, you know, it's a great job. Thank you.
Ms. Underhill? Excuse me, Underhill? I'm having a good time tonight.
Yeah, I would agree. And this is probably just procedural, but as far as entering into the agreement, I guess just tell me where it specifies who is actually able to enter into that agreement.
Well, thank you, Ms. Underhill, members of the board. Basically, this would happen, let me talk about going forward, because that's a little simpler. This would happen, for example, if we were to enter into a license contract with a vendor, for example, that provides, let's say, an instructional delivery software product. And as a requirement of the product for it to operate effectively, for example, would be that we would share student information. names, course schedules, what grades they're in, what schools they belong to, things of that nature. And so if that, in that situation, that this third-party data sharing agreement would become part of that contract. And so in that case, it's the same people who sign all of our contracts. So our contract officer, as well as an officer of the company with whom we have the arrangement. Similar if it was an IGA with another governmental organization.
Mrs. Stone?
I'm for it.
Simple, good.
It looks good to me.
Good. Thank you, Ms. Pingarelli. Any other comments?
Mr. Gay?
I'm sorry, you know what? Yeah. You know, I see the phone sitting next to me. Mr. Sandoval had to point it out. So your presence is still here, Mrs. Ceja Martinez. So do you have questions?
Well, I'm quite grateful that the technology is working this evening, so yes. It's great to hear the dialogue from the governing board, and especially, Mr. Gay, that you've taken the time to highlight the importance of legal contract and the legal liabilities that it would put our district at risk. So the fact that we're addressing it in this agenda item, I wish we would have changed the mix of the agenda items to address this one first. But again, thank you for highlighting the importance of legal contract and the binding words that puts our district in.
You're very welcome. Thank you.
All right.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
I will
So
close
the
this
next
window.
one is 9.3, first reading and discussion pertaining to proposed governing board policy CAA, strategic planning goals and objectives. Mr. Gay.
Thank you, Ms. Pingarelli. Madam President on the phone, members of the board, and Mr. Savoy and staff and guests. I think you'll recall a little over a year ago, February of 2018, when we started down our journey of strategic planning, and then in a subsequent update that we had with the board, I talked about the importance of ensuring that we have an ongoing strategic planning process. What plagues many districts often in this particular context is that they go through this enormous effort to create a strategic plan, and then that plan does something, and then there's no follow-on. There's no process that ensures that there's a continual look at strategic objectives as we move forward from year to year. And so I mentioned in that board update that I thought it would be appropriate, and I got, I think, positive feedback from the board agreeing with that we should basically document that requirement as board policy. And as it turns out, there's nothing in the ASBA policy manual that addresses that particular thing. So I thought, well, we should develop a new policy. In this particular case, the ASBA folks not only like the policy, they like the letters that we chose for it. And so policy CAA, strategic planning goals and objectives. So what I'll talk about tonight, again, alignment with our strategic plan. Why do we need such a policy on strategic planning, the intent and objectives for that policy, and then we'll review the policy text. Now this is one where I think it's pretty easy. This particular policy clearly addresses all four of our strategic perspectives, and so it in fact has a complete alignment with our strategic plan. Why do we need the policy? Well, I think it's clear that effective strategic planning requires a commitment from the board and district leadership. So that statement needs to be made in writing, that commitment is there. Otherwise, it's easy for it to fall off. And then a structured, ongoing process for strategic planning helps to ensure the quality of execution and continuous improvement. The process establishes a strong connection between strategic planning and resource allocation. There's all kinds of other important connections as well, but as we all know, our budgets drive everything that we do in very real and important ways, and it's important as we go forward that when we formulate our budgets, we can be confident, you can be confident, that the budget aligns with our strategic perspectives. That's critical for us going forward. And then finally, the process that the board's already adopted of meeting structure and focusing on our each quarter, one of our strategic perspectives, that process, as well as ongoing updates as we go through the quarter, ensures transparency and continued focus on community strategic perspectives. So here's the structure and intent, very similar to the other one that I just did. It starts with a statement of the board's commitment to ongoing strategic planning. It articulates the 4 strategic perspectives and their definitions. We felt that was important on our strategic planning committee. We felt that was important. Goals change from year to year, but we believe that these perspectives are very stable. Now, will we tweak them over the years? Possibly, and if we do, we'll update this policy. But I think it's important that we make a stable statement to the public that we understand that this is how the community views the quality of our school district. It directs the superintendent to implement and maintain the strategic planning program, to ensure its effective execution, to ensure the plan's continued relevance and effectiveness through ongoing updates, and to ensure that the district plan, the plan reflects the district's mission, vision, and values. Now, I'll just pause for a moment there. The district's mission, vision, and values are documented in Policy A, Governing Board Policy A. You will see a revision to that policy coming up in April, hopefully the first meeting in April, if not the second meeting, and in which you'll recall we had a board retreat in June, and we talked about keeping the vision as it is, but changing the mission statement and updating our values. Our strategic planning committee has done that work. It now needs to go to the cabinet for its review, any adjustments as necessary, and we'll bring it to the board as a revision to Board Policy A. But in the meantime, this policy will refer to Governing Board Policy A in terms of reflecting the district's mission, vision, and values. And then finally, the policy, the intent of the policy is to specify the board's objectives for the strategic planning program. With that said, I will shut this down and bring up the policy itself. Policy CAA, Strategic Planning Goals and Objectives. As I said, it starts off with a statement from the board in which the board publicly states its commitment to annual ongoing strategic planning as vital to the achievement of the district's mission and vision and is shaped by its values. And an effective strategic planning process establishes accountability, supports continuous quality improvement, and ensures steadfast focus on the district's strategic perspectives defined as follows. And here's where the policy lists our 4 perspectives and the definitions of those that we've adopted previously. The policy goes on to say, to direct the superintendent to implement and maintain a strategic planning program and processes to ensure that the comprehensive strategic plan is developed and faithfully executed, annual updated, such changes and additions as necessary for maintaining its currency, relevance and effectiveness, and specifically stating that the strategic plan shall reflect the mission, vision, and values of the Peoria Unified School District as stated in Governing Board Policy A. And then finally, there is a list of several objectives. I won't read them. I know you've read them, but basically there are the objectives of the strategic planning program. So that's distinct from objectives of the plan. I want to make sure that that distinction is clear. These are objectives. The board is saying that Mr. Superintendent, Ms. Superintendent, as you and your staff develop this plan, you have to make sure that your process accomplishes the objectives that are laid out in this particular policy. So with that said, I will stand for questions.
Ms. Stone?
I don't have any questions, thank you.
President Sejar Martinez?
There's no questions. Just thank you again for bringing policy forward that continues to put our district in a position to continue to review risk and avoid risk.
Mr. Sandoval?
No questions, and I'm assuming just, within our process, and I don't know if this needs to be stated, but, again, we talk about inclusion of all of our stakeholders, making sure we're making global decisions, informed decisions, right? That said, I'm assuming somewhere in there, it just states that as we develop our strategic plan, that it does take into account the voice of, all of our stakeholders, or is that just part of the kind of an unwritten part of the tactic to ensure the success of this plan?
I just realized that the one I'm showing you doesn't have a change that I made in it. Gary, would you bring up the one that's in the board packet? I think we made a change in the one I put on the computer here was, and it actually addressed, Mr. Sandoval, that specific, in fact, I've got it right here. At least I think it did. Yes, yes. I may be dreaming. Pardon me. Yes, I'm sorry.
There it
Yes,
is.
second
There it is.
bullet, pardon me, it is in both of them. And it says, includes comprehensive internal and external stakeholder involvement in strategic plan development. I apologize, I was thinking of something else, my mind got somewhere.
No, and that's my bad, because I didn't see it.
No,
So,
well, I
thank you.
clearly didn't either until you brought it up.
Thank you.
Mrs. Underhill?
I think it's very good, very well done, well written, and comprehensive, lays out the plan for the plan, and the purpose of the plan, and the process. The one thing I wasn't sure of the definition is on that fourth bullet on the first page. It says includes governance and regulatory components. So just that little bit. Yeah. I just wanted to, just for my own understanding, what is meant by regulatory components. Yeah, there we go.
Oh, thank you. Yes, Ms. Underhill, basically what that's saying is that if there are any things that we need to do, either in terms of additional board policy or regulations, and in fact, we envision as we go through the development of our 5-year plan going forward, I mentioned earlier, we're developing the process as we develop the plan. And out of that process work, we envision that a regulation will be developed that specifically says, how do you not only develop the plan, but how do you make sure that it's executed faithfully?
Okay,
That's what
great.
that's getting at.
Okay, great.
And in the act of doing that, if we decide that something rises to the level of policy requirement, then we would bring a policy forward as well.
Okay, great. Thank you.
All right. I don't have any further comments, questions, so
Right, thank you.
thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.
All right, let's move on to 9.4, which is the fiscal year 2020 budget team monthly update. Ms. Myers?
Good evening. Again, President Ceja Martinez, Mrs. Pingarelli, members of the governing board. We're here tonight to provide our monthly update for the work that our budget team is doing related to the fiscal 2020 budget, and specifically compensation and our employees' salaries next year. And we do have Veronica Fabella, who is here to provide an update. Veronica is a budget analyst in business services. We did invite other team members last night at the meeting to attend. Unfortunately, no one else was able to join us this evening, so Veronica has volunteered to give you the update with the full team's support. So at this time, I'll turn the floor over to Veronica. Thank you.
Good evening, governing board members, President Ceja Martinez, fellow staff members. Today I'm here to give you an update on the progress of the budget team. Since the last update, the team has met twice on March 4th and yesterday, March 25th. At the March 4th meeting, Michelle Myers and Karen Smith, partner with Heinfeld and Meach, a certified public accounting firm, presented information from the recent compensation study to the budget team. The compensation study information was intended to assist with the identification of compensation-related priorities for the budget team and next steps for district administration. At the March 25th meeting, the team discussed policy GCBA and concerns with the 5-year experience cap and the at least half the year employment requirement to be eligible for a raise. There was also discussion on Prop 206 and what is a livable wage. In addition, possible salary increases scenarios for all staff were discussed based on employee classifications. The next budget team meeting will be on April 1st, and we look forward to providing you with updates from the upcoming meetings. Thank you.
Thank you. Comments? Start with Mrs. Ceja Martinez.
None at this time.
Okay. Mrs. Doan?
No, I'm glad we've got a budget team on all that so we can do the best we can for all our employees. Very grateful.
Mrs. Underhill?
Oops, I know that specific budget, the GCBA was brought up at our last meeting, so I'm glad to hear that you guys are, hashing that out. So thank you, appreciate it.
Mr. Sandoval?
Yep, absolutely. Thank you very much, for spending your free time, and going the extra mile to take a deep dive into this very important subject of finance. And, thank you for bearing with us. And
Sure, my
sticking around.
pleasure.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say also. Thank you for, I guess, tag you're it. It was, I appreciate that you came tonight and stayed through, well, it's not too late, a little after 8. But thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Myers. All right, let's move on to 9.5, which is report and discussion on local, state, and federal legislative issues and activities. Would that be Ms. Myers?
Thank you. I'll actually ask Mr. Savoy to provide the update. Tonight, I will be providing a comprehensive update the next time we meet.
Okay.
Okay, thank you very much, Ms. Pangarelli, members of the board. Really don't have a lot to report tonight. We visited earlier, myself and Ms. Myers. We are tracking a number of different bills. One in particular has to do with the possibility that it will be legal to have loaded weapons on campus, that people could come to a school campus, have a loaded weapon in their vehicle. They can't carry it on the campus, but they could have it in their vehicle, which is a change. So we are monitoring that. But lastly, just to take a moment on the local level, I would just like to acknowledge Dr. Tom Santasteven was a former assistant superintendent in our district for a number of years. He recently passed this past week, and I'd just like to acknowledge his service to the district. So thank you.
Thank you. All right, let's move on to item 10.1, Budget Facilities Planning and Construction Report. And this can be found on our website for anybody to peruse. Thank you very much. Next item is District Budget Report for the month of January 2019. That one can also be found on our website. 10.3, District Enrollment Report for the month of January 2019. Same thing. Thank you very much. And 10.4, Report on Upcoming Meetings and Events. Ms. Siri, do you have any, nothing? Okay.
Any
It's up to
questions?
date now.
Yeah.
All right, move on to 11.1, Board Member Opportunity to Readdress Agenda Items. I hear none, and Mr. Gay is yawning. It's okay, that's how I feel. Item 11.2, Draft Agenda for April 11th, 2019, regular board meeting. All right.
Ms. Pangarelli?
Yes.
I do want to bring attention to this one. This will be, as Mr. Savoy brought attention to, and Ms. Myers, Q4 where we would start student success. And the format is going to be in the study session format so that we can continue to have open dialogue starting a new quarter.
Okay. Item 11.3, Request for Agenda Items for Future Governing Board Meetings. Mrs. Doan?
No, I don't have anything, thank you.
Mrs. Underhill? Mr. Savoy, or excuse me, Mr. Savoy wouldn't have it. He's probably hoping that we don't either. Mr. Sandoval?
So you've called me Mr. Savoy.
I know, I called you Mr. Doan, No, I know. I've had little sleep, but that doesn't.
Nothing at this point. Thank you.
Did Monica have anything?
President Cesar Martinez?
The only thing I wanted to bring up, because I know we had mentioned it in the board meeting, but it's not on the list, is the travel stipend, or excuse me, the travel request as it relates to professional development, it's not on any of these line items, but I just want to ensure that we are going to discuss it in Q2. Is that accurate?
Would that be a Mr. Savoy question? And I got the name right.
So do I need to officially ask for it on a future agenda item, or is it assumed based on previous board conversations it's going to be discussed next quarter?
Mrs. Sayah Martinez, members of the board, it's really the pleasure of the board as we plan the agenda. It would fit in to the next Q4 on student success, professional development. It could fit there very easily to have that conversation about teachers, administrators, and what does that professional development look like with travel, I think, more specifically travel. It could fit there.
So do you want me to do an official, my question is, do you need me to do an official board request and second it to put it in Q2?
Ms. Arias said it's on the.
Oh, we have it. We have it, Ms. Sayah Martinez says at the bottom of the list, review travel and professional development resources for staff and define a platform.
So it is on
And
there.
student success, yes, we have it on there.
Okay, thank you. That's all my only question.
No, perfect, that's great, thank you.
Okay. I have two this evening. I just wanted to get an update on the bond committee / override committee. If anybody would second, just to, I know I,
Some kind of
Thank you.
information, that's not an agenda item, right, particularly?
I think it should be an agenda item
A report?
to have, just to, where we're at, and for the board to be able to discuss it.
That'd be good.
Okay. And then I have another one. So based on previous board meeting and the number of personalized learning programs currently being utilized by the district is not consistent with the information the board was given previously. And I can talk to you later about that. Therefore, I would like to add to the agenda to have a complete listing of all personalized learning programs, their cost, including annual licensing renewal fees, percentage utilization by our teachers, and a brief description of how they align with our academic strategic plan. And Michelle, I can give you the written out language.
I'll second that.
Okay. Okay. So no others.
I'll second that.
All right, Ms. Doan seconded. You can third it.
Oh, perfect. I can.
All right, so moving on to 12.1, it would be adjournment. So if anybody would like to go home,
Let's do it.
Second.
okay. All in favor? Do we need to voice vote anything?
Aye.
Let's just say it to
Let's just say aye.
Yeah, aye.
Aye.
Okay.
Aye.
Passes 5-0. Thank you.
Thank you.